Hello, everybody. I'd like to first call on Laura Kilcrease to kick off our webinar today.
Thank you, Maureen, and good morning, everyone. I'm Laura Kilcrease, the CEO of Alberta Innovates, and welcome to our Small Modular Nuclear Reactor Learning Series. This series is an opportunity for Albertans to discover emerging nuclear technologies and to hear about other opportunities in the supply chain. But we also welcome our Canadian friends and our friends from overseas. Again, we welcome you to this seminar. Small modular reactors, or SMRs, can be used to provide electricity and heating to remote communities for industry and resource extraction applications or for traditional on-grid power generation. They're known for lower capital costs than our traditional reactors, and as such, SMRs can play an important role in reducing emissions while providing stable power in a variety of industrial applications. Our speakers today will dive deeper into the SMR technologies out there and help us explore their potential. You know, we really appreciate the speakers' participation today. We're so thankful to all of you for sharing your knowledge and your expertise. But now I'm particularly pleased to welcome Sonia Savage, Alberta's Minister of Energy. Minister Savage is a passionate advocate in energy and plays an important role in promoting the responsible development of Alberta's resource wealth. So please join me in welcoming Minister Savage.
Well, thank you, Laura, and I hope everybody can hear me. We're getting so used to this type of technology and having meeting virtually, but I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. And welcome to today's session. Like everyone here, I'm really looking forward to hearing from today's panelists, wanting to hear their perspectives about this new and emerging technology. But before we get there, I'd like to just take a couple of minutes and provide a brief summary of how the government of Alberta is exploring the potential of small modular reactors. Started last year as part of our efforts to expand and diversify our energy economy. And in that, we announced our intention to sign on to a memorandum of understanding with Saskatchewan, Ontario, and New Brunswick to support the development and use of the small modular reactors. It's because we see an opportunity for Alberta. This emerging technology has the potential to add non-emitting power to our economy and create new jobs and opportunities for Albertans. And SMRs have stirred a lot of interest here. I often get questions on any panel that I'm on, whether it's about oil and gas, whether it's about renewables. I always get the questions about small modular reactors and what Alberta's interest is in it. So I think this is it brings it to the forefront on how important this is. And by joining this memorandum of understanding alongside our provincial and federal partners, we're going to ensure that we're at the forefront of the latest developments and in safe and modern SMR technology. So some of you might ask, and I certainly get asked, why Alberta? Aren't we known for oil and gas? Well, sure we are, but Alberta is an attractive destination for potential nuclear investment, as we have a lot of distinct advantages when it comes to developing and deploying this technology. And a lot of these opportunities come from the expertise and the background that we have in oil and gas and our long history of responsible energy development. It comes from our respected innovation and research sector, which is on display very much here today. And that's why I'm so thrilled to be part of a session with Alberta Innovates. And it's also because Alberta has technically skilled and educated workforce. Also, Alberta is part of one of the world's greatest uranium resources, the Athabasca Basin. And this basin straddles the northern Alberta and Saskatchewan border. And the resource can serve as reliable fuel for these reactors, further diversifying the resource economy. Now, SMR projects can have a series of wide-ranging benefits for Alberta. And one of the uses I'm particularly interested in is how they can be deployed in Alberta's oil sands. It's because oil sands facilities are often remote. They require a lot of heat and power to operate. SMRs are scalable and could help meet the energy needs of these facilities, while also continuing to reduce the emissions intensity of our oil. And that's important. That's really important for Alberta, and it's important for our oil industry. And it's especially important because so many of our producers have set goals of getting to net zero by 2050. And we see SMRs as part of the solution. Now, we recognize that this is an emerging technology, still in its early stages of research and design, and that some people out there will still have concerns about nuclear power, mostly due to some of the perceptions around older, larger nuclear facilities around the world. The health and safety of Albertans is always our #1 priority. And so it's critical that should we decide to pursue this technology, and when we decide to pursue this technology, that there has to be a robust regulatory regime to ensure that it is safe and effective. And while nuclear is predominantly an area of federal regulatory responsibility, Alberta will have an active involvement to ensure that we are able to effectively manage any aspects that require provincial review. Any eventual application to build a facility would be subject to rigorous federal and provincial approval processes to ensure that environmental standards are respected and that there are appropriate checks and balances in place. So as more information on SMRs become available, ongoing engagement and knowledge sharing will be critical. And that's exactly why opportunities like this webinar are so important. Over the last year, which has been an especially difficult year for Albertans, and especially difficult in our energy sector, in the last year, we've announced several efforts that will leverage the experience and expertise of the Alberta energy sector, areas that will help us diversify our energy mix and help us diversify our economy. As all of you on this webinar know, the strength of our traditional oil and gas sector is what allows us to pursue the opportunities and to be leaders in innovation and a diversified energy future. We recognize that the development of sustainable forms of energy will increasingly become a driver of investment moving forward. And that's why we're taking advantage of these new and emerging energy opportunities. And that includes hydrogen. Alberta has put forward a value-added natural gas strategy, which outlines our competitive goals to become a competitive supplier of hydrogen. We've also announced a new petrochemical program. We introduced legislation last fall to develop a geothermal regime. We've set a royalty rate and provided certainty for those who want to pursue helium. And one thing that I'm particularly excited about is we're pursuing a mineral strategy to pursue critical and rare earth minerals. Now, a lot of you may not know that Alberta has a vast untapped geological potential to meet the increasing demand around the world for minerals such as lithium, cobalt, nickel, vanadium, other rare earth elements. Many of these things are going to be needed to manufacture batteries, cell phones, energy storage cells, and will be needed in a world that's wanting to produce more renewable electricity. And we want to promote Alberta as a hub, not just for conventional energy, but for energy diversification. And we believe that SMRs will play a critical role in that. So as we continue to take actions to support Alberta's recovery, we will explore opportunities like SMRs that could help to diversify our economy and create jobs, while also at the same time reducing our emissions by supplying clean energy and affordable energy. So thank you again for this opportunity to be with you here today and for everybody's interest in this exciting new technology. I hope it's a great seminar for all of you today.
Thank you, Minister Savage and Laura, for your opening remarks. My name is Maureen Kola, and I'm the Acting Director for Clean Technology at Alberta Innovates. I'd like to acknowledge that I am on Treaty 7 territory, the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Nations, including Siksika, Pikaka, Kainai, the Stoney Nakoda First Nation, and the Tsuut'ina Nation. We acknowledge all of the many First Nations Métis, and Inuit whose steps have marked these lands for centuries. Welcome back to those of you who joined us for session 1 and 2, and for those joining us for the first time. And thank you for your patience this morning as we worked through a few technical issues on our side. It is interesting that today we are talking technology, and technology slightly failed us this morning. We are now into our third session of the Small Modular Reactors Learn How series. Alberta Innovates is the innovation engine for the province. When a new technology has potential to benefit Alberta, our teams are keen to explore the opportunities and challenges that those technologies may present. We love to share knowledge, opening up connections for good conversation around energy and clean tech, so we hope this series sparks ideas for you. This series is an opportunity for all Albertans to discover new nuclear technology and to hear more about the SMR action plan, safety and regulations, and innovation in Canada's nuclear industry. We've got a busy agenda with some great content for you today. We will kick off with a technology showcase featuring 9 companies with different SMR technologies, so you can learn a little bit about each one. We will start the showcase with Westinghouse, U Battery, USNC Power, ARC Clean Energy Canada, and Moltex. We will then take a 5-minute break, which was originally scheduled for 10:30, but this will be pushed back probably to about 10:45, just to give us enough time. And after that break, we will come back with presentations from NuScale, GE Hitachi, X Energy, and Terrestrial Energy. Following the tech showcase, Ron Oberth from the Organization of Canadian Nuclear Industries will talk about potential industrial opportunities for Alberta. Now, I know this is a lot of information, so at the bottom of your screen, there are engagement tools, and you can find a copy of the agenda in the related content icon. If you missed our first SMR 101 session with NRCan and the Canadian Nuclear Association and the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, or the second session where we discuss the exciting innovations happening in Canada with speakers from New Brunswick, Ontario, and Saskatchewan, you can view it on demand with our Inventures Unbound platform. Finally, next week on Tuesday, March 9th, will be our 4th and final session, where we will get into community engagement and conversations around energy transition. So just a couple housekeeping items before we kick off the conversation. First off, we will be recording the webinar, and it will be available along with the presenter's slides after the session. We want to hear from you. Feel free to use the group chat in that engagement toolbar at the bottom of your screen to say hello and let us know where you're joining from today. Also, why don't you let us know what drew you to attending this series? During the presentations, if you have questions for our speakers, please use the Q&A button to submit a question. You can let me know if you're directing your question to a single presenter, or if you want to leave it open to all of our speakers to address. We will have 3 opportunities for discussion today, after the first 5 tech companies, then after the remaining 4, and finally after Ron's presentation. You can also use the Q&A if you need help with a technical question, or comment for any issues, and I'm hoping that we've already addressed all of those at the start of this, and we'll have none going forward. If we don't have time to get to your question, we will be capturing all of the questions that are sent in, and we'll give our speakers the opportunity to reply after the presentation. We will be posting the questions and responses on our event page at the end of the series. Finally, we recommend that you log into this webinar using Google Chrome if you haven't already. Okay, let's get going. Let's dive into our first technology. To begin, we have Mike Veller from Westinghouse. Mike is the Senior Director of Advanced Reactors Commercialization at Westinghouse. Prior to his current role, he served as the Westinghouse Americas Procurement Officer, where he was responsible for procurement of direct materials for North America and major overseas projects. Mike, I will now hand the virtual microphone over to you to begin.
Thank you very much, Maureen, and I'm very happy to be here to talk with you all today a little bit about our Westinghouse's eVinci micro reactor. So what is the eVinci? eVinci is a 4.5 megawatt electric microreactor. It's smaller than many of the other SMRs that you may have heard about and even will be discussed today. And really, we've done that for a very specific reason. We believe there's a very large potential market for remote industrial applications in Canada. And the eVinci is a very transportable reactor design. As you'll see in the following slides, the eVinci reactor can actually be transported to site in as few as 3 truckload containers. And we've designed it such that it can be installed and commissioned into operation in a very short period of time, similar to a diesel generator. The eVinci at 4.5 megawatts electric can also be used for combined heat and power generation. So if a cogeneration situation is desired, the eVinci can fit that need. It can also generate 100% high temperature process heat as well if the customer demand is needed for heat. So we believe the eVinci, the market entry is remote industrial applications, as I've mentioned. It's really very well positioned to eliminate diesel fuel logistics and the issues associated with transporting diesel to remote areas. It can improve environmental management just due to its compact design, very small footprint on site. It can also easily be decommissioned. The eVinci can be removed from site and the site could be returned to greenfield very easily due to its very compact design. And obviously, as all the presenters today will likely discuss, we see the eVinci as playing a key role to drive Canada to its 2050 greenhouse gas emission targets. So a little bit about the technology. What you see on this slide is basically the entire reactor, as well as its power conversion system. To give you a sense of size, as I've mentioned, the reactor canister, which is on the left, can fit in a truckload size container. All of the major components of the reactor are within this canister. The other parts of the eVinci that would need to be transported to site really revolve around the power conversion unit, which you see on the right. And then there's also an instrument and control system that would be in a 3rd truckload size container. So really what you see here is an entire nuclear reactor and power output system within one slide. And you'll see there's many typical components inside this reactor, but it uses a very novel technology, which is called a heat pipe, to actually be the primary method of transferring the heat from the reactor core to the process side of the reactor, which is the primary heat exchanger. We'll talk about a little bit about heat pipes because I think they're very interesting technology. So this slide, you see a cutaway of a heat pipe. And this is really what's one of the interesting pieces of the eVinci reactor technology. These heat pipes are filled with sodium. And through a natural circulation process, the sodium actually wicks the heat out of the reactor to the process side or the cold side, as you see in blue, where the heat is transferred in the primary heat exchanger for power conversion. So there is no forced flow in this reactor. All of the heat transfer is accomplished through this liquid sodium phase change and wicking the heat through the heat pipe and circulating back into the reactor naturally. So this really does a lot of things for our technology. It makes it much simpler and much more reliable than what you might be thinking of a very large reactor design that has many mechanical components. Basically, our reactor coolant system is a natural circulating sodium process using these heat pipes. So that allows a much simpler cycle, and it allows us to use a highly efficient power conversion cycle called an open-air Brayton cycle. So this is one of the technologies we believe really sets our reactor apart from many of our competitors. And Westinghouse has done a substantial amount of manufacturing of heat pipes as well as testing of this technology. Some of the markets for eVinci, as I've mentioned, remote mining, as well as industrial process heat. We can also supply district heating. We see power needs in remote communities where district heating can be used, developed in cogeneration situations. Any area of extreme resilience need, just given our ability to transport this reactor and quickly commission it. We also believe that disaster relief is also a potential market for this technology. Currently, Westinghouse is performing a substantial battery of tests to further the technological readiness level of various components of the eVinci design. We're doing something right now called electrical demonstration, and that's going to drive us into a unit cell assembly test, which is really our first nuclear demonstration in 2022. And then the full-size nuclear demonstration we're planning to take place in 2025. This will drive us to commercial availability in late 2026 for the reactor technology. So in summary, the eVinci microreactor can be put in a microgrid environment and paired with many different types of use cases. The eVinci can load follow on an extremely fast basis, such that it can pair with renewables such as wind and solar, which are generally intermittent type sources. So for instance, as a solar generating facility might ramp down in electrical output, the eVinci performs much like a battery and can immediately fill that demand need. eVinci can also, as I've mentioned, generate all types of heating, which leads to many different process uses, which includes hydrogen generation. Oil sands is an area that we believe the reactor can be deployed, as was mentioned by the initial presenter. And we also believe that the eVinci can really be deployed and can open up markets in Canada. You know, there's many areas, as most of you likely know, that cannot be accessed right now due to electrical power, on-grid power not being available in remote areas. And the transportability of the eVinci microreactor really can, I think, drive quite a few markets that we haven't even conceptualized today. So as this technology moves forward, we really see just massive potential for eVinci helping to support global energy needs, as well as support Canada's drive to greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2050. So I appreciate everyone's time today. Please follow Westinghouse on social media. Also, feel free to reach out to me directly if you have questions on the technology. Be very happy to communicate with you. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. Our next speaker is Chris White from U Battery. Chris is Director of External Affairs at U Battery with a specific focus on leading external engagement and outreach activities to optimize U Battery's standing and influence with external stakeholders in UK and Canada. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Maureen, and thank you, Laura, and thank you, Minister Savage, for your time, and good morning to everyone. I'm presenting here from the UK, but as you just heard, our U Battery project is a twin-track project, so Canada, UK, UK, Canada. With that in mind, So U Battery is a small reactor. It's a micro-reactor, high-temperature gas-cooled reactor, which we think has got a number of advantages. It's very small footprint, and it's very affordable because it's quite distinctly different from a large gigawatt scale light water reactor. It uses accident-tolerant fuel. It's innovative, and it's transportable to locations. So, just getting into the meat of it. Okay, here's some of our most recent activity in Canada, where we've contributed to the SMR, NRCan's SMR action plan. So we contributed a chapter from U Battery and a chapter from our parent organisation, which is Urenco, which, for those of you who don't know, is an enrichment company which is based in Europe and headquartered in the UK, with an enrichment site in the US and New Mexico. And we have utilities providing us with uranium, which we enrich, and some of that comes from Canada, quite obviously. So long history of being involved with the uranium from Canada. We've also contributed into the at the hydrogen strategy, so Ontario's and Canada's federal hydrogen strategy, as well as holding at least 2 now supplier days with Ron Oberth's OCNI organisation. So we did one back in November, October time online, which was very good, and we had one before physically at Kinetrix, which is one of our key partners in Canada. And we also do the same in the UK. So we have one each year. We're quite extensive visitors to Canada on a normal year. I appreciate this is a very different year and has been for much of last year as well, but we very much look forward to getting back to physical meetings when permitted. We have a service level agreement with a regulator in Canada, CNSC, for pre-licensing vendor design review, and we also qualified into the pre-qualification stages Canadian Nuclear Labs site at Chalk River in Ontario. So our objective here at U-Battery is to really reimagine the way Canadians live their lives with sustainable energy development. So we want to pair technology with innovation and to contribute to Canada's net zero commitment to 2050 and to enable energy sustainable industries and sustainable livelihoods for all Canadians, as well as powering regional development. So just to recap, a U-Battery is a low-carbon, locally embedded reactor. It's 10 megawatts electric, or 4 megawatts electric, 10 megawatts thermal. It uses accident-tolerant fuel, and it's adaptable to local configuration requirements. Whether that means building in the far north, perhaps on tundra, or equally building in the UK on a traditional nuclear site or a process industry site. Here is a schematic of what a U-Battery actually looks like, and it's quite obvious that it's quite different from the larger reactors in the sense that, as we were hearing from Vinci, this is a very small type of reactor, and our idea is to have a U-Battery available producing heat or electricity by 2028, and that first of a kind could be in Canada or it could be in the UK. In Canada, as I mentioned, the typical site, first of a kind site might be Chalk River in the northern Ontario area, but equally it could be at our enrichment site. Urenco has an enrichment site in the northwest of England, just outside Chester, near the Welsh border, which would also be a demonstration site available to us. If you look at the schematic, assuming you can see that, on the far left we have the reactor, on the far left we have the turbine, and then going left to right, then we have the reactor itself, heat exchanger before that, and then the fuel store. And the idea is with the U-Battery is that you construct a U-Battery. The first of a kind we think is roughly a 3-year build program, but after that, when we get to the sort of nth of a kind, we envisage building a U-Battery in about 18 months, so very short construction period, because we're using modularization and advanced manufacturing techniques. So the idea is that it really is a product that's built at that site using modularization, so the construction period is significantly reduced. And it can operate for 30 years is what we expect, with a refurbishment which could take it out to 60 years. Refueling cycles every 5 years, so that's the reason it's called a battery, in the sense it's plug and play, because you would install a U-Battery, and at the end of the useful life, if it was partnered with a mining site, for example, or a remote community, you might decide after 30 years that that's enough, and you simply remove the U-Battery. You don't really get into extensive decommissioning, and there wouldn't be a requirement to have fuel stored at site. What we would do is we would refuel every 5 years, and we'd probably leave the fuel for one refueling cycle to cool. So it's roughly a 5-year, a maximum period the fuel will stay at the site. There's a control room on the far right, which is quite hard to see, but the idea here is that it's just illustrative really, because we envisage a U-Battery typically, operate remotely and autonomously, and that would really, be a great benefit for, a fleet deployed, for example, in Alberta, or operating in extractive industries or mining sites or remote communities. And we know there are, 600 diesels across Canada that are currently used in those communities and mining sites. And we think a U-Battery is something that could very well fit alongside. The footprint, the geographic footprint, is very small. It's something like 1.5 tennis courts. Or if you look at the right-hand corner there, it's the size of a penalty goal area on a soccer pitch. So a very small footprint, quite distinctly different from the larger reactors, and uses TRISO accident-tolerant fuel. So because of that, we don't have the typical multitude of safety features you might time with a large reactor because it's the proportionality of risk so much reduced. In terms of the opportunity in Canada, as I mentioned, we see the diesel use that's currently happening, with diesel being trucked in or flown in, as being something where we can really potentially come and help industrial units, extractive industries or communities, get off diesel and have a sustainable future with a U battery, operating and producing, high quality, high temperature heat or hydrogen or electricity, for a significant period of time, and producing that in a very cost effective and efficient way. So U battery, can produce as a variety of benefits, as I say, including low cost of electricity in remote communities, cost-effective energy supply for extractive industries. It can integrate nicely with microgrid networks. There are supply opportunities for Canada and for Alberta. Canada is a first-rate nuclear country, and we really see this as an opportunity for getting involved with a Canadian innovation, that then has a tremendous opportunity, not just for domestic deployment in Canada and the UK, but also internationally, because the advanced SMR market, globally has been put at something like $250 million, from 2035 onwards, up to $400 million. So there is an enormous opportunity there for Team Canada to be involved with this innovation. And that brings with it a range of potential benefits. So as you can see from some of the graphics, self-sufficient communities, as well as industrial operations being decarbonised, becoming sustainable, and I know that obviously Canada and Alberta is a natural resource powerhouse economy. So this is one way, potentially of helping, get those materials to market and opening up, continuation of those mining sites, and perhaps allowing new mining sites to come on stream that can't be used at the moment because of the lower cost of power that a U battery would produce at. It's not power for the grid. It's designed to provide heat and power locally for the community or the industrial application. There's a hydrogen opportunity, which is very significant with the new heat hydrogen economy we're all looking at. But if you think about outside of Europe and outside of North America, things like water desalination and potable water in the Gulf become realistic opportunities, as well as synthetic fuels for aviation, as we look to get to jet zero, with zero emissions being burnt in the aviation sector. This is a way of potentially generating synthetic fuels. It has human development stimulus opportunities, and it's a key partner to renewables because it integrates very well. Here are a couple of examples of our mock-up. So we are currently taking forward design, finalising our front-end engineering, and this is one of the things that's coming out of that, which is our reactor pressure vessel module. So this is a full-scale mock-up we're building right now, and this will complete in the late summer here in the UK, which will be a first demonstration of what an advanced SMR could look like, and what a U battery might feel like. So it will be something you can actually have a look at and actually touch. And then finally, this is a U battery configured to provide process heat. And the first thing that strikes you about it is it looks rather like a shed. So the idea is it will look like any other industrial building in the built environment. And with that, from a social license perspective, we think it's a lot easier for communities and mining sites and extractive industries to be able to accommodate this sort of power system, because it's a product. It's installed, as I say, it's quite different from a gigawatt large-scale nuclear site. There is no big fence with 150 hectares or acres of ground. There's no large emergency planning zone. You don't see guards. What you see is a site that essentially looks like any other industrial building. So we think this has a tremendous opportunity to be deployed across a province like Alberta, and you can see it there configured with partly above ground, partly below ground, which plays very well if you're building in tundra. You have a choice of building it on ground or burying it below ground if aircrafts are an issue in more urban areas. So the point about U batteries, it's entirely flexible, for the user. And with that, I'm going to draw my presentation to a close, but thank you for your time, and please do visit ubattery.com, u-battery.com for further information. And I should also say that we are taking forward this year a process to bring in additional engineering capability, capacity and partners, and we'll be going through that for the rest of the year. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chris. Our next speaker is Ken Darlington from USNC Power. Ken is Vice President of Corporate Development at USNC Power. He leverages his strong ties in the resources sector to develop clean energy solutions for clients across Canada and elsewhere. Ken, over to you.
Thanks very much, Maureen, and thank you, Minister Savage. I'll apologize in advance for any redundancies. Obviously, we're all trying to leverage SMRs for the same benefits to Canada and elsewhere, so I'll probably go a bit quick through some of this material. Again, this has probably been touched on several times, but Gen 4 nuclear is simply it's a paradigm change in nuclear energy that brings safety, efficiency, benefits, and cost. And small modular reactors is generally considered to be under 300 megawatts electrical. The point here for us is we're really on the left side of that arrow into the smaller scale. Our reactor is 5 megawatts electrical, which would be able to produce about 15 megawatts thermal, and you could have multiple reactors to have a higher load. So Ultrasafe Nuclear Corporation was formed 10 years ago, privately funded, $50 million US investment to date. USNC Power is our Canadian subsidiary. I'm based here in Canada, and USNC Power will be the developer, fabricator, supplier of the MMR reactor systems, and we're headquartered in Ottawa. The reactor technology itself is not really where the big innovation lies. It's a proven technology, but we're a developer as well of ceramic microencapsulated fuel. That's based on industry standard triazole fuel, but it adds additional inherent safety elements. The reactor itself does not need to be refueled for 20 years. So it's fabricated off-site, it's delivered to site, and it can run for 20 years without refueling. So you're mitigating, spent fuel coming out, new fuel coming in, and in particular, if you're offsetting diesel, you're eliminating the significant cost and supply risk of fossil fuels. And in terms of licensing, we're in the second stage of CNSC's three-stage process, which is one of the leading technologies within the CNSC process. So where are we going to meet the resource industry's energy needs? In 2020, we formed a joint venture with Ontario Power Generation called Global First Power. This joint venture is developing Canada's first SMR at Chalk River Laboratories. We're in the third of their four-stage process, which is a leading position in the process. It's first-of-a-kind commercial demonstration. It's not a pilot plant. The design being implemented is the same design that will be commercialized. So that brings some efficiencies when we get to the commercialization stage, when licensing has already been done on the technology, and it can bring some efficiency in terms of deploying these units into the market. We're part of Canada's SMR action plan. We believe that we'll be implementing, commercializing these reactors ahead of 2030, which will allow resource companies to start working towards meeting their targets. The energy density of nuclear fuel it's really remarkable. One of our 15 megawatt thermal reactors can replace 220 million liters of diesel. So putting that a little bit visually, so you can see just a depiction of our reactor core, the amount of energy you get out of a single reactor core, and I'll just look at diesel. It replaces 250 million liters of diesel, close to 3 million tons of carbon emissions over its 20-year lifetime. So if you look at, say, a 20 megawatt electrical installation with 4 reactors, you're displacing a billion liters of diesel. So the impact in carbon reductions is significant. So what is the reactor? It's a gas-cooled reactor. It uses helium as the coolant with our patented FCM fuel. Single unit, 15 megawatts, can produce 5 megawatts electrical in an adjacent plant. You could also use that heat for steam. Hydrogen production is a promising technology that's also emerging, thermochemical hydrogen production. And you can deploy multiple units to get more energy out of the same operation. It is designed for cold and extreme conditions. Canada is our strategic market for the MMR. So that is already taken into consideration in the design of the modules. The modules are made to be transportable by road, by ship, similar to the other technologies that we've just been hearing about, and a fraction of the capital cost of traditional nuclear plants. This is what a typical plant layout would look like, and this contemplates electrical production. So on the left-hand side is a nuclear plant that considers 2 reactors. So this would be a 10 megawatt electrical or 30 megawatt thermal plant. The system incorporates a molten salt loop, which brings the energy from the nuclear plant into the adjacent plant, and it's non-radioactive. So the adjacent plant is not considered a nuclear facility. So that could be electrical generation, hydrogen production, process heat, or any combination thereof. And the whole size of this, this is a fairly generous battery limit on here, but you're looking at, 2 soccer fields footprint for the nuclear plant. I'll take a moment just to talk about where we're at in terms of our SMR projects. The question always is, when are they going to come available? We're looking at a scheduled date of 2026. We believe we can achieve that earlier. You'll often hear people saying that SMRs are 10 years away, 15 years away, decades away, and that simply just isn't true for all the technologies. There are our technology and others are planning to be in the commercial arena ahead of 2030. We've signed a hosting agreement at the Chalk River site, which was a big milestone.
So it sounds like we may have lost connection with you, Ken. Ken, if maybe you could just try to mute yourself and unmute yourself if you can hear me to log back on. Okay, so apparently our technical issues for today have not yet been resolved. And so at this time, I think what I'll do is I will bring on the next speaker and then we'll get Ken back in after he's maybe logged out and logged back in. So with that being said, just give me a moment here. Okay, so we are going to, our next speaker will be Norm Sawyer from ARC Clean Energy Canada. Norm is the president and CEO of ARC Clean Energy Canada. He has more than 37 years of combined nuclear power industry experience in Canada. He has been involved in both the operation of commercial nuclear power plants and in the regulation of the Canadian nuclear power industry. So, Norm, I'm going to push it over to you, please.
Well, thank you so much. And first of all, I want to say hello from the East Coast of New Brunswick, and I hope everybody is well and safe across the country as we have a discussion on SMRs. I would like to start out by saying that not all SMRs are similar, and I think that's what Ken was talking about earlier. For in our case, for example, we are a Gen 4, we are the new technology, and we are a proven technology. So our base, our prototype has already run for already 30 years in the US. So it's really proven advanced nuclear reactor prototype. In fact, you can now find it described in the IAEA Advanced SMR Technology booklets that's produced. We also are one of the only ones that's a technology that's in the Environmental Ministry Nice Future campaign, the international report on flexible nuclear. So our technology really comes from a lot of operating experience previously. And in fact, that operating experience is significant. It's we had the prototype that ran for 30 years, but in fact, there's over 450 years of experience that we've designed into our technology from various types of technology that came from the sodium-based or liquid sodium type coolant. I can tell you that from the EBR2, there was a number of, it's the grandfather to a number of technologies. For example, TerraPower, Bill Gates' technology, which is a big, it's not our market, it's a big reactor that they're building. There's also the GE Prism reactor, which is different technology for different reasons. The Oklo technology in the US, which is a micro. And in fact, the US has just put together a team to put the virtual test reactor in the US, another liquid sodium technology. So this technology is very well known, and therefore it allows us to really design and enhance and bring it to current codes. A technology that's very, very flexible and applicable to the Alberta energy usage. The flexibility is really all around inherent safety. And what this means for us is that it naturally controls power without human intervention. Basically what happens if the reactor core heats up, the power will actually go down. So therefore you get out of these base events like Fukushima or Chernobyl, you can't get there. And in fact, the prototype, EBR2, actually made tests comparable to what occurred, the initiating events to those accidents. And in fact, this little reactor did extremely well. In fact, it just sat there and returned to some lower power level. Because of that inherent safety feature, it brings kind of two things. It enables a future energy system for which you can link up more with wind power, hydro, and solar, as it controls naturally to the demands of the grid, or you can use a heat storing peaking tanks, they call them, that's well known in the solar industry, to keep your heat there. So really it's really applicable in many areas. As the minister talked about earlier, it's very well placed for hydrogen production, industry, clean water, as some have said, and also a number of chemical processes. So the output is around 550 degrees heat. You can use that for anything, including steam to turn turbines, and it's clean energy. So, for example, coal replacement is a key to our market, as well as the oil sands. And this is really a paradigm shift in nuclear manufacturing, I'll call it, because it's so simplified, and it has no pressure to it, so essentially at atmospheric pressure. Non-corrosive coolants, so there's no expensive exotic metal alloys, there's no massive traditional containment structure, and really no need for permanent on-site fueling, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but we fuel it once every 20 years. It's a 60-year design, so therefore you're going to fuel 3 times for the life of the station, which is really amazing compared to what's occurring today, for example, in the big units. In the US being 18 months, and in Canada, they fuel pretty well 4 or 5 days a week. So really, it really brings into play lower costs, which is really essential for the nuclear industry to survive. The fueling options and the versatility of the little reactors, I mentioned it's 20 years, and it can be used for in many ways. It can go directly from uranium mining and into, obviously, manufacturing fuel assemblies, and can run through at 20 years. But you can also recycle our fuel. So after 20 years, essentially, it's called a reconstitution. It's a process where you take out about 7% of the fission products that you have to that you'll have to take care of for a very short period of time compared relative to what it is today. So you go from somewhere around 250,000 years to 250 years, but 97% of the fuel is reused in the reactor a second time, which is really amazing. So therefore, it's really a recycled type approach. One of the advantages of our little reactor for New Brunswick is they do have used can-do fuel. So therefore, we can even address that if it's asked of us, is that we can actually deal with the used fuel that's produced from a current can-do reactor, or SMRs that are called Gen 3 pluses that will produce used fuel also. And that's important for Alberta, I believe. Essentially, what this means is that if you compare the amount of used fuel that's produced in various types of technology. So on the left-hand side is called light water reactors, which is probably known as most of the U.S. models. What we did a study, a tabletop exercise, where we compared 1 terawatt hour of energy, which is roughly about 90,000 homes in New Brunswick here, in St. John and Fredericton. The light water reactors would produce a little bit over like 2.2, 2.3 tons of used fuel, just pure weight. If you look at a can-do reactor, something like we have here in New Brunswick today, they would produce around 17 tons of used fuel, where a once-through ARC 100 would be around 1.7 tons. And if you perform the reconstitution that I talked to earlier, it's a couple of 100 pounds. It's incredible. For 20 years of producing electricity, it really is astonishing how you can reduce the used fuel or the waste on the backside of the unit, which has been an issue for nuclear that needs to be addressed. And as I mentioned, not all SMRs are the same. New Brunswick had a visionary approach where they dealt with the tail ends, and they picked of course, Moltex will be speaking after me, that we're one of 2 technologies down here dealing with that. And I think that's the real advantage, and where the social license will bring nuclear is to deal with the waste issue, for which our technology certainly addresses that. Where we are today is essentially we've completed phase 1. We're only the second on-grid technology to complete phase 1 in Canada. We are now heading into phase 2. We're about ready to start that. We just received, I hope everybody noticed it in the news lately, we have just received more support from the government of New Brunswick, a significant investment into our company, which matching funds from the private side, which brings us to the end of phase 2 when we're complete, which means that we have line of sight now for the first of a kind, not a prototype, the prototype's already run. We have line of sight to the first of kind of ARC 100 in operation at the Point Lepreau site in the late 2020s. That means our market now, our manufacturing capabilities and other things like that, we will be moving into that in this phase of phase 2 of the vendor design review. And New Brunswick really has really put together a comprehensive climate change action policy, for which nuclear is part of, and they're invested in to prove clean energy technology, and really demonstrates the necessary commitment to the private sector that these sorts of technology, much like most of the world experts believe today, is we need nuclear to address the 2050 net zero goals. And so New Brunswick is really moving forward with that, which will be a benefit to all of Canada as we continue to ingrain ourselves here into the New Brunswick business community as we continue to move forward here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Norm. Appreciate that. So we do have Ken back on with us, but we are going to continue forward. If you do have questions for Ken, that will be an opportunity during our Q&A. We might also just give him a few minutes to address any final key thoughts that he might have for the group. So moving on to our final speaker for this first phase of the technology showcase is Simon Newton with Moltex. Simon joined Moltex in 2018 as Corporate Development Director, initially to help with Round C funding and laterally assuming responsibility for sales and marketing. So Simon, over to you.
Maureen, thanks very much. Good to talk to you all, and thank you for the opportunity. It's much appreciated. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Moltex. We were originally founded in the UK, but we have moved to Canada, to St. John in New Brunswick, along with ARC, largely as a result of the way in which Canada as a whole and the provinces individually are approaching the opportunity that SMRs represent, and specifically because New Brunswick Power selected us and ARC from 90, I think, candidate technologies as 2 reactors that they intend to build at Point Le Pre. And so as a result of that, we're a Canadian business. The team is large and growing in St. John, focused on design, on R&D, and on developing the supply chain. So that the level of support that we get and the I think unique situation that Canada is in, where operators, provinces, and the federal government have a common and sensible plan, is why you're hearing from so many SMR vendors today. There's almost no other country in the world that's in this position. So I think Canada's done astonishingly well. And sometimes this kind of set of presentations might feel a bit like a beauty parade, i.e., as though there needs to be a winner selected, but that's actually not the case. Right? This is the basis for a thriving industry which will, in the future, contain multiple designs meeting multiple different needs. You've heard about different ranges of power outputs and applications and so forth. And so I think it needs to be thought about in those terms, really. I'm going to talk a bit about our technology, about our reactor, the waste burner, that uses recycled nuclear waste as its fuel, and then a bit about the process by which we recycle that waste. A number of people have already talked about thermal energy storage, so I will probably skip over that a bit. We do have other reactors on the drawing boards, but the waste burner is the highest priority and the one that we are developing first. It's a phrase you've heard, no doubt, a Generation 4 reactor. Distinguished from existing nuclear technology, really because the main hazards of current nuclear technology, just don't exist in this design and in other similar designs. And those hazards are very high contained pressures and radioactive gases as byproducts of the reaction. So if you've got radioactive gas under high pressure, you need to make absolutely sure it doesn't come out. And of course, that is exactly what the current nuclear industry does, extremely successfully, but at a high cost. If you don't have those hazards, you don't need that containment and backup systems and active control and so forth, and therefore costs can be a lot lower. And I'll just give you one example. A reactor pressure vessel in a pressurized water reactor would be 30 centimeters thick, manufactured on site. Only a very small number of companies are capable of that level of manufacturing skill. The testing of it is astonishing, and that's because it's a big pressure cooker with some very hazardous contents. There is no pressure vessel for our reactor. The steel tank that it sits in is 3 centimeters thick and can be manufactured by any competent steelmaker. And if you repeat that over every component in the reactor, and then bear in mind the fact that there are many systems and subsystems that we don't have at all, then it's not surprising that the costs are very much lower. This chart shows the costs of nuclear over time. When nuclear first was implemented, people used to refer to it as something that was going to be too cheap to meter. Right? And indeed, the first nuclear plants were very cheap. And this is a measure of their capital cost to construct them. But a number of things have happened since then. 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima, each one of which has contributed to increased safety requirements. The net effect being that nuclear now is about 8 or 9 times as expensive as it was when first implemented. Our reactor, and I don't doubt other Generation 4 reactors, are a way of getting back to those original days of very low capital costs, which is significant. The other thing we mentioned is that the reactor burns existing nuclear waste. So mining, something that's well understood in Alberta, of course. In Canada, there are 14 gigawatts of CANDU reactors producing clean electricity. The waste from those reactors is currently intended for a deep geological repository somewhere in Ontario at a cost of about $25 billion. We can take that waste, we can recycle it, and that waste would be sufficient to power 6 gigawatts of Moltex reactors, generating much more clean electricity. And then the used fuel that comes out of that process is about 1% by volume of what went in. It will still need to be disposed of, and the deep geological repository will still be required, but it can be a very good deal smaller and cheaper. We believe that the recycling of the waste is a business that makes economic sense in its own right. But then, of course, it essentially provides free fuel for a reactor as well. So that process is crucial, really, not just to the economics, but to the social license of nuclear, as Norm mentioned earlier. Like a number of similar reactors, the heat that comes out is the right sort of temperature for thermal storage, which means you, rather than immediately generating power, what you do is you store the heat and you generate the power when it's needed. The net effect of that is you can provide the power for maybe 60% of the time when the wind isn't blowing and allow renewables onto the grid. And so dispatchable nuclear power actually allows increased penetration of wind, solar and hydro. The economics of which does get really interesting. I won't talk about that too much. Several people have mentioned cogeneration as well, and the uses of hydrogen as a vector for other elements of decarbonisation, because electricity is one thing, but a good deal of energy use is in other forms. I mentioned that we have a second reactor on the drawing board, a thermal spectrum reactor called the SSRU. That's a higher temperature output, and so it could be used directly for high temperature processes to make hydrogen. But the reactor that we are constructing at Point Le Pro, really the route by which that would produce hydrogen would be through low temperature electrolysis, i.e. through the fact that the electricity is low cost. And hydrogen gives you a route to so many other things that are the hard to decarbonise corners of the economy, like aeroplanes and shipping and heavy transport. So let's have a look at what it might look like. This is a site layout. Watts is the process by which we recycle existing spent fuel, and the reactor building is right in front of you. This is a 500 megawatt reactor, so we're at the right-hand end of the scale. The first reactor we build in New Brunswick will be 300 megawatts, but the design is capable of being uprated to 500. You can see on the other side of the administration block a thing we call grid reserve, so that's the thermal storage tanks. And then there's a turbine hall. In this case, that's a gigawatt turbine, which we would be driving roughly half of the time with this reactor. So we're talking about grid scale production here, not about the small end of the market. So I guess if I wanted you to remember 4 things about Moltex, one is its cost. And cost is really important. The world will only decarbonise when clean energy is cheaper than burning fossil fuels. And that's cheaper without carbon prices or subsidies or other forms of artificial market. So our absolute focus is on making this as cheap as it can possibly be. And that's based on its inherent safety. The second thing is that we will recycle the waste from the CANDU reactors, 110,000 tonnes of it, and use it as fuel for reactors in Canada. And we can do the same in other countries that have stockpiles of nuclear waste. And the dispatchable nature of the power means that you can actually get more renewables on the grid and build your net zero electricity grid by having dispatchable nuclear. Final point, I think it's one that everybody would make, is that hydrogen is a vector for fixing some of the other problems that, that net zero might bring us. And that, I think, is all I wanted to say. Thank you, Maureen.
Wonderful. Thank you, Simon. So that wraps up this first set of presentations, which I've really enjoyed and have been quite interesting. So right now we'll take some time for a few questions. I know that some of the speakers have been addressing these within the Q&A box as they've been coming in. But if we don't get to your question, please don't despair. We will be posting the questions and responses on our event page once the session is completed. And so with that, my first question to the panelists actually is sort of related, Simon, to what you were talking about around your capital costs. And so this question is, what is the approximate range of installed CapEx for each vendor expects for their reactors when they're ready for commercial operation? And maybe I'll just add a little bit second point to that is, Simon, you talked about that price coming down. What is it about your specific technology that you believe is going to enable that significant reduction in CapEx? Or sorry, CapEx, not CapEx.
Sorry, Maureen, is that a question to me?
It's going to be to everybody, but Simon, why don't you start?
Okay, fine. So our target is $2,000 per kilowatt, which is the overnight capital cost of construction. Because at that level, we can displace gas. And gas is the dispatchable power alternative, really, in national grid infrastructures. And so that's our target, and we have every confidence. All of our cost estimates suggest that we will be able to get there, and it is because of the inherent safety of the design, such that this is not a complicated piece of engineering like a current pressurized water reactor is.
Thank you. Is there others that would like to address the CapEx question?
I mean, I can comment from new batteries. So we think that by the time we get to our sort of nth of a kind, our commercial run rate of the units, the cost of a new battery will be something like 40 to 60 million pounds as a product, and it is a product. And the electricity, or the power, the heat, hydrogen that's produced would be, because it's not power for the grid. So it's the local cost, the delivered cost, where we think we're very competitive, because this is not centrally dispatched and going over, regulated transmission grids, etc. But I think what we think with U battery is that it's something that, because the scale of build is so much smaller, because it's a much smaller footprint, it's much more affordable, so it's much easier for people to, from an investment perspective, to take on board the investment of fleet deployment. So we would see things like project finance, or maybe things like aircraft leasing style financing being available for these sorts of very small units, which have been used in the past by the aviation sector very successfully to build out fleets, where you're not financing the fleet yourself, but there is a financier that's doing that who sees a return. And we think there are big lessons to be learned there from the way asset financing works, and typically in aviation. So we see a lot of opportunity for being innovative in terms of the financing as well as the way these units are delivered.
Hey, it's Ken from USNC. Can you guys hear me now? I apologize for dropping off earlier. I'll just keep my video off. So just to add to that, we see something similar in that a lot of end users will want to be off takers. So it may require a special purpose company to build, own, operate, and sell the power or the heat. Our models on an electrical generation basis in a remote application are coming in around 30 Canadian cents per kilowatt hour. So that isn't necessarily competitive with grid power in a grid serviced region. However, it is absolutely cost competitive with, say, diesel fuel in a remote operation.
Yeah, so from our clean energies perspective, so right now we believe we'll be producing it's modularized, obviously, as everybody mentioned. And as you continue to manufacture, basically it falls into 4 areas where the cost savings continue to grow through the technology development, delivery, regulation, and policy, which are required. All those 4 areas with time will continue to bring costs down. We believe that a unit will be around 500 million, roughly around 6 cents, 6.5 cents a kilowatt hour for very variable and flexible 20-year cycles. We've been doing a lot of studies on this. In fact, we're due to do another one here in this next phase, during a parallel activity in phase 2 of the VDR review, where we'll be doing a bottom-up calculation. But the numbers continue to be consistent to date. As we mentioned, GE has done some significant support on us on our numbers. We're able to compare to other technologies. So we're pretty comfortable with the numbers we're getting. And as people mentioned, one thing people have to understand is the wording of the LCOE in the past. There's a new concept coming, value-adjusted LCOE, where you're really looking not as an asset, but as a grid, because the new grid of the world needs to deal with CO2. And what drove and I was talking to the Minister of Environment for Canada 2 weeks ago, and telling him what drove us to where we are today from a CO2 emission perspective was the old LCOE calculation. People now believe, the experts around the world believe that needs to be looked at, because you have to take it as a holistic view, not as an individual asset view. And I think everything needs to help each other to get to where we want to be. And that includes gas, and the whole spectrum needs to be looked at from a grid perspective, not from an individual asset perspective.
Okay, would anyone
from
else
Westinghouse side, just a little bit of input on cost from Westinghouse side. One of the reasons why we've developed the eVinci to be a very small transportable reactor is just due to the construction cost and keeping that footprint not just small, but nearly eliminating the on-site construction work that's needed. We really see that that's one of the major drivers of cost for deployment of nuclear, especially first-of-a-kind nuclear.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. So the next question is actually tied to, other potential, other than energy production in Alberta, and the ability for nuclear technology to maybe be applicable in applications such as agriculture.
Yeah, so it's interesting. A lot of people don't know this. At one time, if you look at Bruce Power, some of their units used to have steam offshoots into various, I think there were tomato growing facilities or whatever. It was quite interesting, actually. And which really, I think that's, we don't talk about those sorts of things very often, but greenhouses and things like that. These are heat producers. So anywhere you would essentially be using heat, you can use these types of generations of heat, so you can, push it anywhere you wish. That being one example.
Yeah, I think again from the U-battery perspective, we do see opportunity for district heating for greenhouses, for off-grid agriculture as being one of the very real applications, because the ability to sit there and produce the heat, a U-battery operates at 750 Celsius, so that high temperature, high quality heat output could work very well and enable off-grid agriculture. So yeah, we absolutely see it being one of its key human development propositions.
Great, thank you, guys. Okay, so on to the next question then. This is really around, what are the challenges associated with finding or relocating appropriately skilled employees for SMRs deployed in remote areas, and whether or not there's really opportunity to employ people from the local community, and sort of what's maybe the level of training that would be involved to get people up to speed that are maybe not familiar with nuclear power generation.
I can take a shot at that from the Westinghouse side for eVinci. The amount of support staff needed for the eVinci, for instance, and probably some of the other, especially small reactors, it's actually very low. So as you compare it to a large PWR CANDU design where you need hundreds of staff to operate these reactors, we actually could foresee a future for the eVinci where remote operations actually a possibility. So the number of on-site staff and needing, a long reactor operator qualification program and maintenance and testing training programs for hundreds of resources is actually one of the challenges that we believe the eVinci actually solves. Not to say that there won't be plenty of opportunities for people to get involved into reactor training and things like that as a result of the deployments. But it's not, these are very different from typical, large fixed installations.
From our clean energy's perspective, as I mentioned, I've had a lot of experience. So, and in fact, I was a licensed operator at one point. So I think simplicity is the interesting piece of this. It won't be as being very much less complex than a CANDU reactor today. The training programs and things like that will be much simplified. Therefore, more people can get involved. But as was just mentioned, if you look at the CANDU perspective, they came, they built, and left. And basically, I'm just talking from New Brunswick perspective, the supply chain is the key component here. You're switching from, in our case, from on-site type people working, which is quite a few, to having the distribution of the supply chain and the work required within the supply chain as a pan-Canadian approach. Our analysis has shown that roughly we can probably carry about 75% of all things we need can be built in Canada. Of that, approximately 50% can be in New Brunswick. That means other provinces can join in and participate. So wherever these things are essentially built, modularization is a piece of it, but it needs to be supported by the local communities and with direct and indirect jobs. So in our model, we looked at it very holistically again, not from a plant perspective, which there's a lot less than people that it can do because it's less complex. However, the supply chain becomes the real driver of jobs. And that supply chain, our work, the way we looked at it, is very, very similar to what you'd have in shipbuilding or pipe building. Alberta has all kinds of experience with that, from the modularization to bring in big pieces up into the oil sands. A lot of experience out there. And so that's very useful to us.
So Norm,
Sorry, I was just going to say I'd echo what Mike and Norm are saying. I'd also add that, bringing energy independence to remote communities, there really isn't a lot of a staff complement at a microreactor, but that energy independence can position communities for economic growth as well. So jobs can be call it a byproduct of bringing that energy to those communities.
Wonderful, thank you, Ken. And Norm, I just wanted to build off what you were saying, and I feel like I should have had you in this afternoon session, and that would have been a great introduction into what Ron is going to be speaking about later this morning around sort of those supply chain opportunities for Alberta. So I think we'll get to be able to dive into that a little bit more deeply here shortly. So any other comments from the panelists on this particular question around sort of, employment or retraining type opportunities?
I think from a Maltex point of view, I think one thing that's worth bearing in mind is that Canada's in the process of creating an SMR industry. And in the next 10 years, it's going to need a lot of very well qualified people to work in that industry. And so if you know anyone who's 16 right now, or 15 or 14, you should be talking them into moving into this field, right? Get them to make the right choices at school, and then we'll have the people that we need to employ in 10 years' time. Because it won't be a whole lot of old guys like us, right?
Thanks, Simon, for that. good advice, I'm sure. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. And this is maybe more specific to certain technologies that would use helium in itself. But the question is really around helium becoming more of a scarce and expensive resource. And just if anybody's can address sort of how this may affect the operation of your specific design and how much helium is required. So it's looking like maybe no comments on that one. So maybe no helium is part of the current designs, and maybe that was just a misunderstanding. Okay, so then maybe on to the next question then. This really goes around to sort of, and actually there's one here again that's around sort of fabrication of SMR components. And I'm going to leave that one for this afternoon when Ron's part of the conversation, and he'll be able to dive that into it a little bit more. So perhaps now if we take it to sort of the oil sand sector, that's a large component of the industry within Alberta. There's a very specific question around sort of the requirement of steam at sort of specific pressures upwards of 10,000 kilopascals and at 300 degrees Cs. And just sort of a comment maybe from you folks on what is sort of the level of thermal steam that can be produced.
I can take a first stab at that one, Maureen. So micromodular reactor, we're producing molten salt at 565 degrees Celsius. So if you use that to create superheated steam, you're going to have steam at about 520 degrees Celsius.
And more or less the same from Moltex, by the way. So same sorts of temperatures.
Yes, Maureen. So maybe I can bring you back. And so I believe Alberta Innovate had some studies made for the oil sands and looking at various technologies. We did a tabletop exercise here matching up our technology to the ones that were reviewed in the studies. The studies was in 2016 and 2018. In fact, we scored equal to the top scorers, so we've measured ourselves against the what's called the reference facility in the oil sands, and we came out very, very well. So any of the things that was with SAGG and the mining piece, the steam pressures and all that. So we did that tabletop exercise against those studies, and we came out very well.
Thank you. Okay, well, on that note then, guys, I think we're going to wrap up this first session of Technology Showcase. We are now going to take a 5-minute break, so we will be back at 10:40 for the next set of technology companies to present on their technologies. So thank you once again to this first group of presenters for taking the time and sharing sort of a little bit about your technologies here with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Just going to do a couple quick mic checks. So Doug, I believe I see you joined.
Yes, Doug McDonald's on. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. Ron, I can see you as well.
Yes, how is the sound, Maureen?
It is good, thank you. Simon.
Morning, Maureen.
Good morning, Simon.
Can you hear me clearly?
I can, thank you.
Excellent. Good.
Yes, thank you very much. Catherine? Okay, Scott.
Good day, Maureen. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you guys very much. And Catherine, I believe you've joined as well.
Hello. Good afternoon, or yes, good morning, I guess, in Calgary.
Good morning. Yes, we're spread across Canada and maybe beyond today. So thank you, guys. We will be starting in just about 4 minutes. So feel free to mute yourselves now, and I'll let you know when we're going to get kicked off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so welcome back, everybody. Thank you for your patience as we transitioned from one set of presenters to the next. So we are going to be continuing on at this time with our technology showcase. And next up will be Scott Rasmussen from NewScale. Scott is Director of Sales and is responsible for all aspects of developing domestic and international customer partnerships to implement NewScale's SMR power plant technology. So with that, I will pass it over to you.
Oh, Maureen, thank you so much. You can hear me okay? Perfect.
Yes, I can.
And thank you, everyone, for allowing me to be here today and for NewScale being able to be here today. It's pretty exciting to see all these technologies and to really hear about how the advancements in the SMR community are really taking hold and moving forward. So I'm glad to be here. I do want to let you know that I'm filling in for Dom Claudio, who is NewScale's Director of Sales for Canada. He had a family emergency, so hopefully I can fill in admirably for him today. Hang on, Maureen. Oh, there we go. I clicked the wrong button, but it looks like we're heading in the right direction. So I don't know if you heard about NuScale and who we are and what we're attempting to do, but we were formed back in 2007 for the sole purpose of really designing and developing a small modular reactor that turned into the NuScale power module. It's a pressurized water reactor technology and based upon some tried and true principles and operating capabilities. But the goal was to really try to improve upon that to make all of the components factory manufactured for ease of implementation, and really to really create a flexible implementation model and operation set. So I won't go through all the details here, but you have the information in front of you, and I just did want to highlight that we've been at this for quite a while, and one of the biggest, most important elements of that effort is to develop the technology to get to the next slide, which is becoming the first SMR to undergo licensing in the U.S. And we gained that approval from the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission in August of last year. Yes, even during COVID times, the NRC will work diligently to bring new technologies forth, and we've done that. I think the most important aspect of this is not just that we've gotten a license and that we're moving forward, but the bottom line is that the due diligence, the design, and the overall effort have come together to develop this technology and to move it forward and to bring it to fruition. Frequently asked, so what is the SMR promise and when will it be available? Well, once you have a design license, it's available. We're moving forward and we're working on our first project, which will be implemented. We'll be delivering product from our factories in 2027 and working with the customer schedule. We'll be bringing the first NuScale power modules online in 2029. Like I said, I do want to say that that's per their schedule. We do have the ability to be delivering and constructing plans for the first commercial operation in 2027. So what was the whole goal for NuScale and what we're trying to do? Clearly, with SMRs in general and with NuScale's technology, we wanted to focus on smarter, cleaner, safer, and more cost-competitive technology to deliver clean energy. So from a smarter perspective, we wanted to be able to provide a capability for a flexible operation for mission-critical facilities, and also to be able to integrate with renewables, et cetera. Cleaner. I think it's important to note with a cleaner energy source, it's not about trying to outdo wind or solar. It's about integrating with them and providing the same level of clean energy, but in a much smaller land footprint for larger scale needs. Safer, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but the bottom line is a NuScale power module does not need any operator action, no outside power outside of the power plant, and meaning AC or DC power, and no additional water to cool the plant in the incredible unlikelihood of an event. So I think that lends towards the overall view of what SMRs want to be, and utilizing a lot of the safety approaches that have come to the forefront over the last 10 years or so. And naturally, cost competitive. I won't even belabor that point. So what does a NuScale plant look like? Well, our base design includes 12 modules. And you can see here in this cutaway, there's 5 of them, and there's one on the side that's being assembled to be put into position. And you can also see that in that upper center picture there, you can also see that each one of those modules is really isolated from the others. So if something should happen, it doesn't impact the others. So it really minimizes the potential for any kind of radioactive release, which lends towards an emergency planning zone at the site boundary. And quite frankly, it could be even smaller. But we have gotten approval for some specific cases from the NRC for the site boundary, and we will continue to work to making it smaller. In the fall, we announced that we did 2 major things. We upgraded the NuScale power module to be able to produce 77 megawatts of electricity. And we also came up with 2 new plant sizes to meet various market needs. One is a 4-module plant and one is a 6-module plant. And at the outset, these are really geared towards focusing on replacing coal-fired boilers and such at a coal-fired plant. So it's that was the whole goal, was to try to be able to be flexible enough to meet those specific needs. And there's a discussion again about our triple crown of safety with no operator or control system actions, no AC/DC power, and no additional water. I mentioned before that NuScale's base design has multiple modules in a given plant. And what that really does is it gives you the opportunity to do multiple things simultaneously. So it's great that a technology can support integrate with wind, as you see here, provide power to a mission critical facility like a hospital or a military installation or some such, and also provide some power for desalination, hydrogen production, talk a little bit more about that in a moment, and also oil refineries. But with NuScale's power module design, you can have each module providing power and critical energy to each one of those facilities or industries at the same time. I think that's critically important to be able to handle all flexible functions and all flexible needs for a given arrangement or for a given situation. I wanted to bring this to the forefront. We talk a lot about being able to integrate with renewables. We've done a lot of work with utilities and with even some wind farms. And here's some of the information presented here. But it's important to note, and sometimes I apologize, I overuse the word important. I think on this page, what you want to take away from this is that we have multiple functionality to provide for load following, to integrate on a grid with wind and solar, and to be able to fluctuate very easily and very timely to meet the overall grid needs. So there will be no gaps in clean energy production for a given need. I mentioned hydrogen production a few minutes ago. And just want to point out on this slide that a single NuScale module can produce over 2,000 kilograms per hour of hydrogen, or 50 tons per day. That's an impressive amount. I feel that we need to understand as a whole that hydrogen is going to be a big part of decarbonizing the transportation sector around the world. But I don't think it's well understood that to date, the focus is using carbon-based fuel for the energy production to support the hydrogen production. It kind of seems like it's not a net win there unless you go forward with SMRs to be able to power that. That's my personal political statement for the day. So following that statement on hydrogen production in general, you can see that this is becoming prevalent in the global community. Many countries have established hydrogen strategies and goals and plans. And we've talked with a number of folks in the UK that are looking, as an example, in the UK, that are really trying to look how to go forward with their 10-point plan and manage it. And again, they're struggling with the concept of they want and need much more hydrogen production, but the strongest energy source for them to utilize today is coal. So it's not a win-win yet. And we're poised, I think, along with most of the others on this panel, to bring the technologies forth to support them to do that. So the bottom line is the SMR promise is that they are here. The future of energy is here today. And I wanted to include this slide to show these are the components that we built and tested and continue to move forward. And there's a picture of our control room down on the bottom. And you'll notice there are not a lot of people there. There are not a lot of resources required to be able to move forward to manage this plant in the control room. What it does require about 250 or so people to manage the overall plant for safe, effective production. I like to put that in there so people understand that when a NuScale plant is built in a community, it's not built for 10 people to work there. It's for about 250 to 300, which does depend upon regulations and that. So that's what I wanted to bring forth today. And I'll look forward to any questions as we go forward. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Scott. Appreciate the presentation. Our next speaker is Doug McDonald from GE Hitachi. Doug is responsible for the technical aspects and delivery of GE Hitachi's innovative, cost-competitive small modular reactor. He has over 34 years of experience, including 32 with GE and GE Hitachi. So with that, over to you, Doug.
Thank you very much, and good morning. My name is Doug McDonald with GE Hitachi. I want to give you a little bit of an overview of what our BWRX 300 small modular reactor is all about. First of all, to put it in perspective, where has GEH been? GE has been in the nuclear industry since 1939, at the beginning when we were looking at nuclear physics to do a variety of things, which then led into nuclear power. This timeline sort of takes you through all that has been. I will stop briefly in the 1960s, where we did participate as a partner with AECL to bring the first CANDU precursor, the nuclear power demonstration project, to life there in Canada. In the mid-90s, we brought together our first advanced boiling water reactor, which sort of dispels the recent trend of nuclear power plants not being able to be on time and on budget. We brought that plant, first of a kind, in Japan, online in 38 months. And then in 2017, we really started looking and shifting our market focus to small modular reactors. In the past, we'd always been increasing the size of our reactors to improve the economics in a dollars per kilowatt basis. In the 2017 timeframe, the market was changing. Our engineers took a strong look at what it would really take to make a difference to break the cost barriers and to make SMRs, nuclear power plants in general, more cost effective. To date, we have delivered over 67 reactors and we're licensed in 10 countries. So we certainly have quite a bit of experience, certainly in Canada, and looking forward to forming a partnership with Canada to bring the BWRX 300 to life there. Brief introduction of what a boiling water reactor is. There's on the panel, we have quite a few technologies represented. The boiling water reactor is really the simplest way to make steam. Hopefully you get that from this slide, where we have a nuclear core, boiling water, which is then taken out of the containment and, for example, can drive directly a steam turbine to make electricity to feed to the grid, and then that would close the loop back on. When we're feeding the grid, we do have load following capabilities to partner well with renewable energies that are in presence today in the grid to make sure that we match up with that. But also, as we look for that use of the steam, we can bypass all or part of it from the steam turbine making electricity to industrial applications. If we bypass it all, we could do things such as producing steam to drive district heating. There's multiple locations in the world that have a very strong presence in that. We could also look at it as producing, taking that steam and going through a heat exchanger and producing steam for example, oil sands there in Alberta to help with the extraction of the resources there. And so there's certainly a variety of things to do with either pure electricity or pure steam environment for the BWRX 300, as well as if we integrate the two, where we produce some electricity and some steam and can balance the two very easily and on demand to meet a variety of applications such as desalination. And then Scott mentioned some of the hydrogen production. We can certainly take a combined electricity source and steam source to optimize on hydrogen. Our investigations into hydrogen really indicate that the lowest cost of electricity will be the winner in the SMR market for who can produce hydrogen the most efficiently. And so we're definitely taking a look at that and excited about that going forward. As we looked at how to really break the barriers for cost that we've seen in the past nuclear power plants, we came up with the BWRX 300. It's a small modular reactor. It is our 10th generation reactor. And we've taken a lot of the lessons learned. We looked at our past reactors, which some had forced cooling, or forced circulation with recirculation pumps, not dissimilar to what you have in the CANDU reactors in Canada, and natural circulation. We settled on natural circulation to be the simplest about that. We also took a very close look at what our safety cases, our safety strategies were trying to tell us. And with that, by moving the point of an isolation valves from containment to part of the vessel, we're able to have a major reduction in our LOCA strategy, loss of coolant, major improvement in our safety case. And with that, it drove a huge amount of simplification from a plant that was already relatively simple. We're able to reduce our volume by quite a bit, on the order of about 90% on a per megawatt basis, which we'll touch on in just a minute, as well as implementing a wide variety of components that are already represent our fleet today, that we know how to manufacture and we can bring to market very quickly. We have licensing already started in Canada in the form of the vendor design review, as well as licensing topical reports in the United States, where the United States is actually taking a look. US NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, is looking at individual aspects of the BWRX 300, comparing it to our past plans, and then be able to make licensing determinations, initial licensing determinations on those. Right now, we plan to be operational with our first plant, hopefully in Canada, in 2028. As I mentioned, one of the biggest changes that we did for the BWRX 300 was these integral isolation valves, which are pictured in the slide that you're now looking at. We certainly have it patented. It has received NRC approval for the application with the BWRX 300. And with it, it really changes our LOCUS strategy, our loss of coolant accident strategy. A very unlikely event. However, past plants, past designs have focused a lot of effort on mitigating something that's very unlikely. With integrating those with the vessel, it changes the strategy. So instead of adding lots and lots of water, we can actually contain the water, not waste the water, keep it within the coolant system, and then at the same time removing heat from the containment. And so all in all, it leads to a very simplified licensing strategy, as well as allows us to go for a very small plant based on the number of megawatts. This is sort of an overview graphic of an existing large plant today, the ESBWR, which the BWRX 300 is large part based on. And it sort of takes you down. Systems are able to be eliminated while maintaining still world-class safety, and other systems are able to actually be minimized to be able to accomplish the same safety objectives and at the same time improving safety as we mitigate and change one of the primary sequences we have to look at from the safety basis. From a deployment strategy, a significant amount of the technology being deployed in the BWRX 300 has operating experience. That goes from the reactor pressure vessel, if you will, the power module, which we've always had one module for our steam generation and steam conditioning for decades, and we're able to put that in one vessel and have it shipped to site. Also, reactor internals are very similar. Our fuel is exactly the same fuel that is being deployed and used in the world today. We have a large licensing basis in multiple countries, and we've started discussions with CNSC of how to bring that licensing basis, primarily from the US, but also Europe, into Canada and allow the fuel to be used there with very minimal, with effectively no changes. We're very excited about that. Many other components, our nuclear instrumentation, all of these pieces have been deployed in the past. We're taking an evolutionary step with our reactor so that we know that we can come online, we have high confidence of operation, and we know we have a very high confidence in meeting our availability and capacity factor targets, because we're making small changes, we're doing, and in the 10th generation, we know how the plant is going to respond. We know the maintenance activities that are associated with it, and we're applying lessons learned and best practices from decades of operational experience for similar reactors. Overall, in our safety case, we have the ability to, in a design basis accident, to walk away from the plant. I'm not suggesting we do that, but no power, no operator action required for at least 7 days. We have a very small EPZ zone associated with that, as well. If anything beyond 7 days were to be necessary, it'd be very simple actions, filling a pool at filling a pool at approximately grade level with atmospheric conditioned water. So it's effectively hooking up might consider a garden hose, or more formally using the flex equipment that nuclear power plants have existed today, very simple pumps, motors to be able to achieve that water addition into the IC pools we can see here. Again, this would go for anything from a station blackout, where you lose not only your offset power, but any internal power generation that you may have for backup, non-safety related, so it's very mild transients when we do that, and able to cope with any type of other design basis accidents for a minimum of 7 days. And with that, I've consumed most of my minutes there. And Maureen, I'll turn it back over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Doug. For our, of course, technical issues to continue. Our next presenter was going to be Catherine, but Catherine, I just want to confirm before I pass it over to you that you can see the slides now. If not, we will move to Simon, and I'll come back to you in a moment. And Catherine, I believe you are on mute. Okay, so it looks like we're not being able to hear you at the moment. So Catherine, I am going to move on to Simon first, and then I will come back to you. So Simon, here we go. Simon Irish is from Terrestrial Energy and is CEO of the company, has 20 years of global investment banking and investment management experience in New York and London, and has a formal education in the quantitative sciences and quantitative finance. So with that, Simon, just give me a moment here to get your slide decks set up, and I will pass it over to you. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just start off by thanking Alberta Innovates for the opportunity to participate along with my fellow panelists in this discussion in this SMR Learn How series. So to my, I'll move straight into my slides. And one moment, please, while I rearrange the screen. Thank you. So I'd like to, I'll start off with the company. Terrestrial Energy's purpose is to commercialize a cost-competitive nuclear power plant in a compelling timeframe using a targeted and pragmatic set of reactor technology and design choices. Our nuclear power plant uses molten salt reactor technology. This is generation 4 nuclear technology in a small and modular power plant design. That power plant is called the Integral Molten Salt Reactor. The regulatory process and engineering of IMSR, both are advancing. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission review of IMSR started early 2016, and that's expected to be completed by the end of this year. Our utility engagement took a step forward late last year when Ontario Power Generation selected 3 candidate SMRs for deployment at Darlington by 2028. Government support took a step forward as well when the Canadian government's flagship Strategic Innovation Fund invested 20 million Canadian dollars in our project. The IMSR genealogy and design choices. IMSR genealogy and design choices give high technology readiness. The technology is based closely on molten salt reactor technology demonstrated at Oak Ridge National Lab. It builds on 60 years of Oak Ridge National Lab reactor design work and on many other demonstrated technologies. Our IMSR is a molten salt reactor system that uses a fluoride chemistry, a once-through fuel cycle using low-enriched uranium at standard enrichment. That's very important for operability over the near term. It's a thermal spectrum reactor system, graphite moderated, and it has an integral core architecture. The key innovation is the replaceable IMSR core unit. This ensures industrial requirements of inherent safety, operational simplicity, and a 90% plus utility factor are achieved, and they're achieved by the integration of the primary reactor components, the reactor core, the moderator, the primary heat exchanger, and the pumps, into a sealed reactor vessel within a compact and replaceable unit that has an operating life of only 7 years, and then it is replaced with another core unit. On this key innovation, patents have been applied for, and in many jurisdictions, patents have been granted. Nuclear technology and design choices have clear economic impacts. And I'll return to our purpose as a company. Our business purpose is a cost-competitive nuclear power plant. We achieve that purpose with 5 factors. These are the 5 factors that drive the cost of a nuclear power plant. They are size, construction method, temperature, pressure, and inherent safety. So with respect to those five factors, size, we are small. We are designing this to be right size for the market opportunity, not too small, but right size. But we accept the fact that when you make a reactor small, you will make it more expensive. Fixed costs abound wherever you look in the nuclear reactor industry, in the nuclear industry. You make a reactor small, a power plant smaller, you will make the nuclear power more expensive. We can offset that to some degree by incorporating into our design modularity and anticipating the use of modern factory-based construction methods to build those components and assemble them on site. So it is modular. But smallness and modularity, they're ubiquitous now in the industry. But the exciting factors that drive the competitive position of a nuclear power plant are associated with those in the generation 4 space, namely temperature, pressure, and inherent safety. With respect to temperature, our system, being a generation 4 system, operates at, we deliver heat at 600 degrees C. That enables us to have much, much higher thermal efficiency, 50% higher thermal efficiency compared to a generation 3 system, and by extension, 50% higher capital efficiency too, all other things being equal. From a pressure perspective, being a generation 4 system using a molten salt, a thermally stable molten salt, your engineering requirement is atmospheric pressure. It's a low pressure system. And there are cost virtues and cost benefits associated with engineering in a low pressure environment. And the third point is inherent safety. With a thermally stable molten salt and a molten salt fuel, you can achieve you can incorporate into your design the powerful virtues of passive and inherent safety. And those are not just important as economic factors, they're important for social acceptance factors as well. So IMSR technology and design choices lead to compelling reactor economics. Those 5 factors with respect to our choices, we believe that we can have a power plant that can dispatch power at $5 a megawatt hour. IMSR is fundamentally an advanced heat source, and this defines its many uses. It's used as a generation 4 technology. All of them operate hot, much hotter than generation 3 technologies. In our case, we can deliver heat at 600 degrees C. Yes, we can make electric power with 50% higher efficiency compared to a generation 3 system. And that's the first step for the deployment of this technology. But we can also provide heat and power, thermal energy and electric power to many other industrial processes too. So you have a much broader opportunity for the deployment of your nuclear technology. And I'd like to talk about 2 of those opportunities in the remaining time I have. Firstly, hydrogen production, and secondly, natural resource extraction. So with respect to hydrogen production, hydrogen production requires a process that has a total, these are requirements for clean, cost-competitive hydrogen. A process that has a low total energy requirement, uses a low-cost source of clean energy, and has, and I'm sorry about the slide, it seems to be we've got a platform issue here, and has the ability to sequester CO2, because that's the it has to be zero carbon.
So it looks like we have now lost Simon. Simon, are you there? Okay. So Simon, if you can hear us, maybe log out and log back in. And so we'll get you to come back in once you're able to reconnect. And so at this time, Catherine, I am actually going to push the slides over to you. So let me just provide a little bit. Oh, sorry, those are the wrong. Oh, goodness. Today has been quite the day for tech issues. So thank you all very much for your patience here. Catherine is going to be our next speaker, and she is president of XE100 Canada, leading the company's strategy and commercial development activities in Canada. She has a long-established reputation as a respected leader in the nuclear industry, having served as an executive board member of the Canadian Nuclear Association and chair of the Regulatory Affairs Advisory Committee. So, Catherine, over to you.
Thank you, Maureen, and thank you to the organizers of this of the learning series, and to all my colleagues. I think we're all in some ways in this together. The slides are moving around. Okay. Can we just, well, do I have control?
You should have.
Okay, is somebody moving them? Because I'm trying to move them. But it's
Yes,
not
this
working.
looks more like
There.
it's perhaps a feature of the system. So Catherine, maybe just give us a moment. All of the other presenters, if I can just ask that you do not touch the slides. Catherine, I'm just going to go in for a moment. It might have been Simon thinking he was still presenting. So let's just start again. Catherine, if you will continue, please. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Okay. Okay, yeah. So thank you, as I was saying, and yes, it was. I'm sorry I couldn't present on my time, as I was curious with buttons, and I shouldn't have been touching anything while I wasn't presenting. Well, I found out soon enough. This is a really incredible time. We are really at a crossroads, and you can see from the amazing technologies that are being presented, everybody's. You go again. Is it changing for everybody or just for me? The slides.
It's changing for everybody. So one moment, Catherine.
Okay.
Let me get you reset back up here again. So Simon, if you are on and you can hear us, please know that we'll come back to you once Catherine is done presenting her slides. Thank you.
Okay. Can I move them or will you move them? I can move them?
You should be able to move them, Catherine.
Okay, great. So I'll just want to give everybody a little bit of sense of what X-Energy as a company is doing. We are a company that designs Generation 4 reactors, high temperature gas reactors. Our founder, I don't know. I'll just speak. I just want to say that this is a little distracting. It's right in front of me.
Yes.
Yes. So we are designing high temperature gas reactors, and we are we currently have an award in the U.S. to complete our design and build a reactor under the ARDP program for operation in 2027 at a grid scale. And we are designing grid scale reactors. We're designing a mobile reactor. And we also have reactors for space applications, nuclear thermal propulsion, as well as lunar surface fission power. Hold on. Yeah, that's where I wanted to be. And we also have designed and fabricate the fuel for these reactors. So we are our designs are all based on TRISO fuel, tristructural isotropic fuel, with a uranium oxycarbide fuel kernel. So I want to talk about the innovations that we've applied. So the technology that we're working with, this HTGR technology, is not brand new. Like most of the technologies we've heard of today, they're all based on years of development and in some cases application. So there have been several reactors in the world working and operating with this HTGR technology. So we've taken that technology and we've basically innovated. We started with the fuel, and it's changing again. I'm going to give up. The fuel is an intrinsically safe fuel. It's a very robust fuel. We start with the kernel. It's encased inside layers of ceramic coating, and then in our case, for our grid scale reactor, we use it in a pebble form. However, it can also be used in a prismatic form, as some of the smaller reactors are. If the fuel itself, we've innovated to the point where we're producing, where we are producing fuel that is very homogeneous in its structure. It gives it better performance characteristics. What you see in front of you here are actual images. The first one is from a few decades ago from AVR and the fuel used in Germany. It was good for the time, but obviously not as good as it could be. What you see with the Chinese tomograph, with the HTR10 fuel that's actually used right now, a lot better than the German one. But then when you look at how the innovations that we've put into developing our fuel, you see fuel that has an incredible uniformity. It's, I would say, almost perfect in terms of the spacing of those particles. This itself will give our fuel, does give it much better performance characteristics than were even seen in the previous incarnations of this technology. So these are the kind of things we're doing. And by improving our manufacturing and our design of the fuel, we're both increasing the safety, but we're also improving the cost effectiveness. We have less waste of the fuel material. From innovating on the fuel, we are also looking that safety of the fuel lends itself to a safer reactor as well. And our reactors are intrinsically safe. They require no operator action, as many of the others. They also don't actually require any mechanical systems, neither active nor passive. The reactor, through the physics itself, will just shut itself down. So there's no need for any kind of systems. The reactors are inherently safe by physics. This is it's quite important in that it gives a credence to the idea of not having any emergency planning outside of the plant itself. The type of inherent safety also lends itself to a simpler design. We have a design that has 1/10 the number of components of most of our current power plants that we can compare to. And that simpler design, which is fundamental to all of the designs that you'll see in Generation 4 reactor technologies, really aids our safety case. It also aids our training of operators. It allows for modular construction and just a whole slew of benefits of the simpler design and the safety of the design. So what you see here, just for those that aren't familiar, we have the reactor core. You see the green arrows that show go through the core. They're representing helium that goes through the core. The core has 220,000 pebbles in it. The reactions are happening in there. The heat is produced. Helium runs through, goes through what we call the cross vessel over steam generator, and you have the formation of steam in the steam generator. Comes out at 565 degrees C. Very important, high temperature, high quality steam that can be used for process applications. The pebbles will, in their time in the reactor, will experience about 167,500 megawatt days of burnup. The 15.5% uranium that we start with ends up at 1.3%, and the plutonium is burnt up as well. So a really amazing result from this particular design. Fuel, once it's burned up, goes straight to a dry storage container. There's no need for a pool or anything like that to store the used fuel. We are in the middle of licensing, both in the US and in Canada. We're going through the VDR process, which is not licensing, but it is the pre-licensing activities to interact with our regulator here in Canada. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have a project in the US, the ARDP project. We're also hoping to be building it with OPG for operation in 2028, and both of those projects require much interaction with the regulators to ensure compliance with the regulatory systems in both cases. There's some cooperation between the regulators as well on HTGR technology. Our units, one of the top level requirements, along with safety and affordability and simplicity, one of the top level requirements is that the units can be factory built, modular, and road shippable. And the reason for this is our founder wanted these to address energy poverty as well as climate change. He's a philanthropist and aims to support some of the work he's doing in Central Africa as well as other parts of the world. And in order to achieve that, we need to be able to get these plants wherever they're needed. So road shippable is another high level requirement which we subscribe to. That has really informed much of the work that we've done, and has informed the design work and the modularization of the components. The intention is to be able to construct these in much less time than previously done. like many of the other designs you've seen, this unit is highly flexible. It performs well as the fulcrum of an integrated energy system. It provides the baseload power that one would need in order to allow for a flexible energy system that uses wind or solar or other energy forms. The graph you see on the side there, load following, the red line is the XC100. This is an actual simulation. The yellow line is solar. The green one is wind, and you can see the load is in blue. So the reactor will simply load follow up and down as the load is required. It can change from 40% to 100% full power, changing at about 5% per minute. So within a very short time, 18 minutes, I think, or 12 minutes, it can go from 40 to 100 or down from 100 to 40. So it can readily load follow. The unit, because of the high temperature seeing, is able to not only, it allows for process heat applications as far as hydrogen production. It can also deal with some of the new high temperature hydrogen processes that are being developed right now. So just for clarity, the helium comes out at 750 degrees C. The steam then comes out at 565 in our standard plant. And our standard plant is 320 megawatts electric from a 4-unit standard plant. But each unit itself is 82 megawatts electric, 200 megawatts thermal. There's no requirement to have the units as 4. It can be as 2. This is my second to last slide. I actually have 3, but I only want to talk about the next 2. This is just an image of where we're at right now. We are producing fuel. Where the fuel picture that I showed you in the beginning was our fuel that we've manufactured. This is half of the facility that currently exists. They're all full-size pieces of equipment to manufacture the fuel that we need. This is a licensed facility at Oak Ridge. We are in the process of licensing a larger facility to allow for commercial volumes, which would mean more of the same lines, more of the same equipment, just larger numbers of them. And to the right is our simulator and our training. It's a training simulator. It includes all of the operations and performance of the plant. It's a fully coded simulator at this time, and it is in use right now. So just to show you some of the work that's been progressing. And of course, here in Canada, Canada is extremely important. It's extremely important to me. I've been here for 35 years in the industry. Well, I've been here all my life, but for the industry, and just great opportunities right now moving forward with our close partners and vendors. This I will leave for people to just read as they want. I don't want to take up any more of your time. A lot of this is what I've just spoken about in terms of just a summary. So thank you for the time. I appreciate it. And thank you, Simon, for pinching and when I couldn't get my camera to work and things. So.
Thank you, Catherine. And thank you so much for your patience in working with our technology and all the challenges. It was a great presentation in the end. So at this time, I do want to invite Simon back. He was, as you may recall, just previously chatting and getting into some of the case studies that he saw for their specific technology. And so, Simon, I'll now pass it back to you.
Well, thank you, Maureen, and I apologise for the IT glitch mid-flow. But I'll return to my first case study, hydrogen production. With respect to clean, cost-competitive hydrogen production, you need a process that has a total low energy requirement, and that energy requirement is met by a low-cost source of energy, and that it's clean. So you're able to either sequester the carbon byproducts of that process. As you consider that industrial process, it's important to remember that if you use water as a feedstock and are seeking to remove hydrogen from water, your energy budget is 5 times that of the energy budget required to remove hydrogen from methane. And since energy is effectively money, you're going to find it very, very difficult to compete with natural gas. But you still can use natural gas to make clean, cost-competitive hydrogen. It's not just from a feedstock perspective, but if you have clean energy to drive that process, and if you have a method, a simple, cost-competitive method to sequester the carbon, and if you use natural gas, you end up with a byproduct in 2 forms generally. One is gaseous CO2, and the other solid carbon. And they've got very different implications with respect to sequestering. But if you can deliver those three elements, you will get a clean, cost-competitive hydrogen in industrial scale. Generation 4 IMSR has the ideal size, the ideal temperature output, and the economics to provide the middle piece, the energy piece that would be needed to drive such an industrial process. So Maureen, next slide. Maybe easier to ask you to change slides at this point. Thank you. There are two industrial methods that use natural gas. The first one, steam methane reforming, that's the incumbent technology today. The challenge for that, with respect to my model from the previous slide, is that it emits gaseous CO2, and that's generally expensive and challenging to sequester, and the sequestering tends to be very site-specific. But that's not the only method. There's an alternative method, another method, which is a methane pyrolysis. In this case, you simply take the hydrogen chemically off the methane molecule, and the byproduct is solid carbon. Now, solid carbon is much more straightforward to sequester. And there are much, it's from an economic perspective, it's more attractive as well. So it's not surprising that there's escalating interest in methane pyrolysis as it uses natural gas as a feedstock, but solid carbon is considerably eases the CCS challenges and costs. Next slide, please. My second example is in oil sands production. The standard method today in Alberta is SAGD, steam-assisted gravity drainage. That's the leading recovery method. However, because it uses natural gas combustion for the thermal energy to create the steam, it has a substantial CO2 footprint. Now, in terms of alternative sources of energy that are clean, the Generation 3 nuclear cannot help. This has been studied already. In 2003, the Canadian Energy Research Institute concluded that conventional nuclear, namely Generation 3 technologies, facilities are too large, their steam pressures are too low and inflexible, and the steam that they generate cannot be transported far enough. These conclusions were echoed by a further study by the Petroleum Technology Alliance Canada in 2009. They confirmed those conclusions. But Generation 4 IMSR, because the Generation 4 system operates at a much higher temperature, it has the ideal size, it has the ideal steam temperature to deliver game-changing environmental impacts in oil sands production. It can be the industrial baseload, reliable, cost-competitive source of energy to create the clean steam to support oil sands production. So, Maureen, on that point, that's my last slide, I will turn over to you, and we can, hopefully we've still got enough time for a panel discussion.
Yes, thank you, Simon. We are actually going to jump into the Q&A now, so thank you all very much. And just a reminder, if you do have questions, please feel free to post them into the Q&A box. There was one question that came up for the last panel session, which was really sort of around the CapEx comparison. And so I thought maybe I would also take this opportunity to ask this to you guys as well, in terms of, what are some of the CapEx that you expect once your technologies are commercial? And this question was building off of that to sort of say, could you comment on sort of the life cycle cost, including maintenance and disposal relative to gas, if you're able to, and that would be natural gas.
So I guess I'll go first. This is Scott from NuScale, and we're currently working on completely revising our cost structure for the 4-module and 6-module plant, and then leveraging that for the 12-module plant. We expect to have that data compiled and released by the end of March. So that's happening right now. And we've done that from a bottoms-up cost perspective. And it's critical to understand that it's just not a theoretical thing. It's based upon components that we've built, designed, tested, and teaming with engineering, procurement, and construction firms like Fluor and Sargent & Lundy to move forward on our standard plant design. So at this time, the capital expense is about $2,850 per kW. That's for the 12-module plant, and we're focusing on driving that down. I really don't have the details at my fingertips on total life cycle cost. We've developed that for a few international customers, but that's really focused on their specific licensing plan, and it's quite a bit different than Canada. So I really don't want to give you false information. So I'd like to take that away and come back a later time.
It's got to add a little bit more on the BWRX 300 size. Certainly, as we look at the life cycle cost, the BWRX 300 was birthed to address that. We looked, again, from a GX perspective, we do have a long history in the reactor business. In the 2000s and the teens, we certainly saw a shift in cost perspective. Many of our customers were saying you have to be competitive with the lowest forms of electricity generation, gas being a prime example of that. And so that was where we developed the BWRX 300 to be competitive in that nature. From an overall life cycle cost, maybe I could answer it from a levelized cost of electricity, which, right now we're sitting between, from a US dollar basis, $30 to $50 per megawatt hour, depending on the financing schemes. But in our levelized cost of electricity, we have the capital cost to build the plant. We also have the annualized maintenance, as well as the fuel and a provision for decommissioning in there. So there's, certainly, as Scott mentioned, several different parameters, multiple parameters that are country specific. And so that gives you a general range of where it sits into. And we're certainly continuing to drive that down, even below that if we possibly can, as we look out for multiple deployments, similar site, or even the same site, helps bring overall deployment down and will help reduce the levelized cost of electricity further. But right now we're in that $30 to $50 per megawatt hour range for all costs associated with the lifetime deployment.
Maybe I could respond from an energy perspective. Our view on it, I think I mentioned this in my presentation, it's 5 cents a kilowatt hour is the full lifetime, fully loaded plant life cost of power. That is approximately, that's US cents. That is approximately competitive with natural gas. It depends on the delivery point. There's some parts of North America where the delivery price of natural gas is extraordinarily competitive, but it's generally cost competitive with natural gas. And if you move outside North America to Europe and Asia, where the reference point is probably liquefied natural gas, you're obviously in a much stronger competitive position.
Thank you. And if I could just add for X-Energy, we have done our calculations to a great level of detail. But the one comment I will make is that we all, I'm assuming it's the same as everybody, we are targeting to be competitive with natural gas. We recognize, or we at X-Energy recognize the absolute need to do that. I just want to caution that when we look at numbers like LCOE and so forth, there are so many assumptions that have to be made in establishing those numbers that really you have to look at it as a case-by-case basis. It's really difficult without having all the same assumptions to do any kind of real comparison. So I don't want to dodge the question. I just want to put just the reality around it with respect to that. And yes, I agree. It has to include the capital costs, the maintenance costs, the decommissioning, fuel costs, fuel disposal costs. So I'm in complete agreement with my colleagues. And I just wanted to say that that's just a caution on doing comparisons without knowing what the assumptions are.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I appreciate the comments. So another question, and this really comes to sort of quality of water, and in particular sort of in oil sands applications. Sort of that produced water is typically used for steam generation, and the quality of this water is inferior to typical boiler feed water. For any of your technologies, is water quality a potential issue?
Yeah, Marina, I think I answered a similar question, maybe the same question. It's true for the BWX300, and I suspect it's true for the other technology. You'll certainly add into it, but what we'll typically do is separate the two streams. Now, in the case of the BWX300, we have high quality water going through the reactor. We have an intermediate heat exchanger separating from the oil sand or any type of other industrial applications. I believe that the technologies, whether or not they use water or not, will have a similar arrangement where they separate the coolant going through the reactor from the industrial application by heat exchanger or some other type of means. So you would have two different loops going through there, or perhaps even on the industrial side, it could be open loop, but one would suspect it typically be closed loop.
Great. Does anybody else? Go ahead.
I would have to agree with Doug that, it's one of those where could you use lower quality water? The answer generally is yes, but would you want to? The answer is really no, because of the fouling factor on the components, et cetera. So to really keep your plant running optimally, you'd want to clean up that water and use the highest quality water possible. But like Doug said, you can separate the streams too and use it for industrial process and also for reactor usage. It's more of a practical matter than I think a really an overall requirement from a nuclear perspective.
Great. Thank you, guys. So the next question that's come up, and I think both through your guys' set of presentations and the speakers before you, there was conversation around the expected sort of commercialization time to occur in 2026, 2027. And so really this question is around sort of what might be perceived as a delay in the commercialization of the technology, or is this really sort of the normal time that it would take for deployment?
I'll start with that one. And I'll start because NuScale has talked about this a lot. This is one of those situations where, and I've asked my finance team, my supply chain team, is this a technical issue? Is it a commercial issue? And the reality is it's more of a commercial issue. If more money was provided to advance the manufacturing of NuScale's product line, then we could deliver those products a little bit earlier, probably the end of 25, the beginning of 26. But the path we're on right now is being able to deliver NuScale power modules off of the manufacturing production line, if you will, at the end of 2026. So to throw a whole bunch of extra money to move it up, the market's not there yet. And the reason being is the time it takes to develop the site, put the plans in place, and initiate the licensing effort. We're right on schedule for a number of customers versus being way ahead. I don't think you want to build product and have it sitting there. It doesn't seem like that's the most economical path forward. What the reality is we're ready now, and we're moving forward. Manufacturing trials are occurring, working on advancing those efforts to not just manufacture, but manufacture really refined and the most cost-effective methodologies. So we're on target.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, the readiness is a question of the client readiness. Just echoing a little bit what we just heard. So in our particular case, our clients are requesting to have operation by 2027 in one case, and a potential client in Canada by 2028, and that's what we're working towards. And I think one of the big things to always think about is the regulatory readiness. So we're going through the process, and we don't see any major hiccups in terms of our timeline for meeting the kind of timelines that we're looking at with respect to the deployment of 2027 and 2028. But at the end of the day, for any future one, we need to start thinking about license to prepare site in Canada and so forth. So that would probably be a greater limiter on the timeline in our readiness.
I'd probably echo some of those comments. I think the market demand for these type of technologies is going to define to agree the pace at which they're developed and deployed. We have, I think, all of us have seen the very interesting data points over the last 5 years with respect to the rate at which the market for SMRs has been developing. It's certainly very interesting and encouraging for an SMR developer. From a regulatory perspective, I think a number of these SMRs have made very significant, impressive progress with that first step to market, which is a regulatory step. We have been actively engaged for the last 4.5 years with the CNSC's vendor design review. With respect to the regulatory point and the technology readiness point, our system and other systems as well are ready to go for deployment this decade.
And for the BWX300, the other panelists have brought up great points. We're certainly in a similar situation, working hand in hand with our customers to bring them online when they need them online, as well as working through the regulatory regimes that we're interested in. And one thing I might answer is, for the BWX300, our first deployment is 2028. We expect it to be that way, assuming our customers continue to manage their plans to need electricity, carbon-free electricity at that point. But in the last 6 months, what we've been really shifting our focus to is instead of that, not only that first deployment, but how to have tens of BWX300s deployed in North America, tens deployed in Europe, and tens deployed in other countries by 2035. Over the last few years, there's been many organizations, countries, companies committing to low carbon emissions, net zero in the 2040 to 2050 timeframe. But now we're starting to see a shift back by 2035 to make meaningful contributions in that area. And that's where we think the BWX300 is very well poised to meet that demand of tens deployed by 2035.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. I appreciate all of your presentations that you made today and sort of addressing some of the questions that have come up. So we are now going to shift to our final speaker of the day, and this is Ron Oberth from the Organization of Canadian Nuclear Industries. Ron is President and CEO of the Organization of Canadian Nuclear Industries, an industry association, 140 private sector companies that supply equipment and services to nuclear power plants in Canada and abroad. So with that, Ron, please go ahead. Ron, you may be on mute. No, I'm still not hearing you at this time, Ron. So maybe while our comms team is assisting Ron in getting sort of the volume up and running, I'll just take a quick moment here and see if there was any other questions that may have come in and that we could look to address. Although Ron, I'm getting communication that you might be back now. No, it still looks like you're not with us. So while we're waiting for Ron to reconnect, one of another questions that came in, and so panelists, if you don't mind just jumping back on, for all the designs with heat storage, what is the preferred storage medium? Catherine, if you're chatting, you might be on mute.
No, I'm not chatting. Oh. We're not using.
Okay.
Oops.
The question was the preferred storage medium for thermal energy.
Yes.
Our view is that it's a molten salt. There are many different types of molten salt. Molten salts are excellent heat transport fluids. They have high specific heat capacity. They make a lot of sense just to be used in a big vat to store thermal power, to even out, to balance power generation with demand for power. We're obviously not the only company with that perspective. There are others in this space, whether looking to design a molten salt reactor or another generation 4 system, they see the virtues of at the very back end of using the molten salt as the as the thermal storage fluid for storage.
Wonderful. Thank you, Simon. And I think, Ron, you might be ready to go now.
Yes, thank you for the technical assistance, and I apologize for the slight delay, but it gave Simon a chance to make a relevant comment. I wanted to start by thanking Candace Patton, who I know is no longer with Alberta Innovate. She reached out to me a couple of months ago to start planning this session, and I'm happy to have made some useful contributions. Maureen Kohler doing a wonderful job today in managing the session, and I think Alberta Innovates is in very good hands. So I think most of you may not know of the Organization of Canadian Nuclear Industry. So let me start off by just saying a little bit more about who we are and why, if you are an Alberta company wanting to participate in this exciting new energy field in Alberta, why we're an organization you'll want to get to know. As Maureen mentioned, we currently represent well over 200 suppliers to the nuclear industry. We do 4 things for our suppliers, and some of which will be quite relevant to Alberta companies wanting to enter this industry and provide components and services to the SMR vendors that you heard today. I'm also pleased to say that all 9 SMR developers that presented this morning are members of the Organization of Canadian Nuclear Industries, and I value their support. So what we do for our members is we help them connect with customers. In this case, the customers for suppliers would be the SMR vendors. We work with suppliers and our members in helping them build their capability and their capacity, both in terms of manpower and in terms of QA capabilities and manufacturing technologies. And down the road, when we start to export SMRs around the world, from New Brunswick, from Alberta, from Ontario, we also lead trade missions to various countries. In fact, this morning I was on a virtual trade mission with Romania, where we are looking to build a couple more CANDU reactors. But down the road, after those are completed, SMRs will also be in the picture in Romania. And we advocate for nuclear power, mainly in Ontario, but we expect our advocacy will begin to move into Alberta. Most of our members are what we refer to as small, medium-sized enterprises, typically employees between less than 100, and it's probably the sweet spot for many of the companies that supply components and services to the oil sands sector in Alberta. Our supply chain has been largely Ontario-based, and I want to underscore until now. If you look at the next slide, you'll see where we are. We're all huddled down there in the warm part of southern Ontario. You'll recognize some of the names you'll see on this chart are well known in Alberta. For example, Hatch Energy, I know, is active in Alberta, Aecon, SNC Lavalin, ES Fox. So we have an Alberta base, an Ontario base. And what we want to talk about today is how we're going to move that supply base into Ontario, into Alberta, I should say. Because clearly, if Alberta is going to deploy SMRs, the benefits of deploying SMRs have to flow to Alberta companies to help them supply to the industry and basically to diversify the Alberta economy. So 2 major documents are guiding the path to SMR deployment in Canada. The first one, the SMR roadmap, was released in 2018, and more recently, the SMR action plan, the action plan was released just a few months ago in December. OCNI was a contributor to the action plan, and we submitted 3 major actions, which are shown here. OCNI 01, which is to develop a pan-Canadian SMR supply chain. OCNI 02 is to promote the use of advanced manufacturing methods and technologies to reduce SMR capital costs, which are going to be critical to their successful economic deployment in Alberta and beyond. And the third action, OCN 03, is to promote diversity and Indigenous engagement across the SMR workforce, which I think will be a key component to acceptance in Indigenous communities in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and beyond. So let me talk about each of those actions and how we intend to exercise them. So OCNI 01, let's start with that one. We are currently working with New Brunswick because they're a little bit ahead of Saskatchewan and Alberta. And OCNI worked with the New Brunswick partners that you can see on this start, Arc Energy, Moltex, and some local companies, Energy, New Brunswick Power, Sunny Corners. And that was called Growing the New Brunswick Supply Chain. It was held on October the 30th. And we talked in that 2-hour webinar about what we can do collectively, OCNI with New Brunswick partners, to build a strong New Brunswick supply chain. There are now companies in New Brunswick that supply to New Brunswick Power. Some of those need to be retooled to be capable of supplying to either Arc Canada or Moltex Energy, Moltex Canada. And you heard both of those gentlemen speak this morning in the first session, who are leading the path to SMR deployment in New Brunswick. We also discussed a case study. And I want to talk about that case study, which I think is very relevant to Alberta. So in the province of Ontario, one of our major power producers, Bruce Energy, is located on the shores of Lake Huron. And here you see a map of not only Bruce Power, but the many suppliers that have moved into the region. And this is because Bruce Power is investing $12 billion to extend the lives of 6 of their nuclear units. Now, that kind of investment will draw people into the community, but moreover, New Brunswick Power, Bruce Power was visionary in saying, we want to build strong infrastructure. We want to support our local communities with hospitals, with schools, with roads, with facilities, and we can do that by the investment of companies coming into that region. To date, 60 suppliers have opened local offices and facilities in the region around Bruce Power. So kind of imagine that as a map of Alberta down the road, with companies moving into Alberta to support the SMR vendors and the SMR projects that are going to be built there. So as part of the Bruce Power major component replacement program, they've let some major contracts. One was a $140 million contract for reactor components to one of our member companies located in Oakville called Laker Energy. So Laker that was then faced with a decision. Should we move some of our manufacturing into the Bruce area to satisfy the requirement that Bruce has for localization? Or should we find a partner, a non-nuclear partner already established in the Bruce area? And I think you know the answer to that question. It is B. They found a partner called Acromold, located in Goderich, Ontario, that already manufactured, had manufacturing capability, and they appeared to be well suited to pivot and move into the manufacture of the nuclear components. What they needed was some coaching, some collaboration with Laker Energy. So Laker worked with Acromold to help them implement the quality assurance programs, and not only that, they audited them to ensure that they met 3 standards. And for those in Alberta who don't know these yet, you will as we get into the nuclear sector. CSA N285, which is a pressure boundary standard. CSA N299.4 is one of the standards on supplying quality components to the industry. And NCA 3800 is also a pressure boundary standard. So what happened? A successful partnership was established. Acromold and Laker opened up their second plant in Goderich to manufacture nuclear components for the nuclear industry. That's the role model that I would like to see replicated in Alberta. So as you said, we've got options for Alberta companies to enter the nuclear sector. You can partner with existing nuclear suppliers, which I think is the best route. They can help you acquire the skills and the QA programs for nuclear. Not only that, as part of the OCNI 01, building a pan-Canadian nuclear supply chain, OCNI is planning on developing a Canadian Fit for Nuclear program. And I've italicized that because Fit for Nuclear is actually a trademark for a program that has been developed in the UK. In fact, we are now in discussions with the UK nuclear industry about how their program was used to build a strong UK supply chain, which Simon Irish, being a Brit, would appreciate, was somewhat underprepared when the UK decided to re-enter the nuclear field with a new generation of reactors about 20 years ago. So Fit for Nuclear was a way that the UK government invested in a program to build a UK nuclear supply chain. So we can call ours Fit for Nuclear Alberta, and with collaboration from the Canadian government and Alberta governments, we will see what we can do to build that network in Alberta. A second option, or a part of that option, would be for some of the Alberta fabricators to leapfrog straight into some of the advanced manufacturing capabilities. So that's OCNI 02, promote the use of advanced manufacturing methods to reduce SMR costs. So our first step along that path, in fact, the second one, this is because this is our second forum, we held an OCNI a two-day advanced manufacturing virtual forum on November the 10th called Strength Through Innovation, which was sponsored by one of our speakers today, NuScale Energy, for which I will thank them again. The purpose of that forum was to look at how we can begin to bring advanced manufacturing technologies into the nuclear sector. And we learned from the case study from the aerospace sector where advanced manufacturing is already progressive. Here you see a GE jet engine, of which most of the components are made using additive manufacturing and other advanced manufacturing technologies. Here's the GE jet engine, 300 plus parts are made with advanced manufacturing to the exacting qualities and standards required for safe aircraft travel using jet engines. So our industry can learn a lot from GE, and in fact, our colleagues from GE Hitachi, I think should be well suited to move advanced manufacturing into their GE 300 BWX 300 design. You'll also see that in that workshop, we had a panel featuring all 9 SMR vendors once again, each of whom talked about their plans to evaluate advanced manufacturing methods, not only what we sometimes refer to as 3D printing, but various other binding technologies, welding technologies, that have really revolutionized manufacturing and made it more cost competitive and faster. So I'm proud to say that the SMR developers, all of whom were on the call today, are all looking at advanced manufacturing technologies, and I would encourage Alberta Innovates and other forums in Alberta to look at how they can start to catapult Alberta straight into advanced manufacturing systems. Our third action, OCNI 03, is promoting diversity and Indigenous engagement across the SMR workforce. So we've done this by signing a memorandum of understanding with the First Nations Power Authority, FNPA, is an organization that specializes in helping Indigenous communities participate in energy projects on their Indigenous territories. So far, they've worked on projects related to small hydro, solar, and wind projects. But through this memorandum of understanding, we hope to leverage our experience in the nuclear sector, along with the First Nations Power Authority capabilities in those other sectors. And in fact, one of the partners of First Nations Power Authority is an organization called Atunda, which is an Ontario-based organization, and they will be speaking at the next Alberta Innovates Forum on March the 9th, which is about engaging with local communities. So I'm proud to say that we've got very interesting plans to engage more fully with Alberta. Really appreciate the partnership with Alberta Innovates. And I can only echo what all of the other speakers said today. Why SMRs in Alberta? It's clean energy. We will help to diversify the Alberta economy into new areas of manufacturing, clean energy production, of course, and to help reduce the oil sands footprint by using clean energy to fuel some of those SAGD projects in the oil sands, and to enable green hydrogen production with nuclear, all of which will help us get to net zero by 2050. Thank you for your patience today. It's been 3 hopefully exciting and beneficial hours for those who stayed on to the end, and I hope there are a good number of Alberta suppliers who will want to engage with OCNI after this discussion. Thank you, Maureen, and I'm ready to take some questions if people still have the stamina for them.
Thank you, Ron. And yes, it has been a long session, and I would say a technically challenging one in some ways. So we do have a couple of questions that I would like to pose your way. And one of them is really, acknowledgement by a company here that does provide diverse services and supplies, relating to sort of radiation protection. And they'd really love to be able to become more involved within the nuclear power and the emerging field of SMRs. And so really, I think this is a great question, sort of asking, what is the best channel to reach out to, the OCNI in order to begin dialogue? And I would even take that broader as well. Is the OCNI also the best way, to connect with some of those existing nuclear suppliers within the industry?
Well, those are 2 sweet questions. And the answers are very easy. Reach out to me. I'd suggest you visit our website to learn a bit more about who we are and have a look at our supplier directory. I can certainly make Maureen has my email coordinates, or you can reach us on LinkedIn. So please do reach out. And no doubt OCNI, as an organization of suppliers, in which the 9 SMR developers are members of our association, is an excellent vehicle for Alberta suppliers to join the industry. We already have a number of suppliers, not a number, we have probably 4 or 5 suppliers in Alberta that have joined our organization. And we look to get that into the double and triple digits as we move forward with Alberta's SMR deployment strategy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ron. The other question that I was curious about as well, you mentioned that there are opportunities for companies that don't exist currently within the nuclear sector to participate. Are you able to provide examples based on sort of what you're seeing of companies that are transitioning from providing supplies to other industries? What are some examples of sort of the different supply chains or specific components that would be needed sort of within the nuclear industry?
Well, I did cite one example in my presentation. That was the company called Acromold that built rubber molding for, I believe might even have been the oil industry. And they were able to transition into nuclear. So I think any Alberta companies that supply components to oil sands projects, which would involve piping, valves, pressure vessels, complex control systems, any of those companies, I think, have the capability to become qualified nuclear suppliers. I would only recommend that they look for collaboration with an OCNI member company who works in a similar area so that they can ease them into meeting the nuclear qualifications. But it's been done, okay. It has been done, and there are probably more examples, but I think the classic example is the Laker Acromold story, and I'm certainly happy to put anybody in touch with the Laker people and the Acromold people who can give you their own testimony of how well that partnership works.
Okay. Thank you, Ron. And I think we are going to wrap it up now as we are sort of at our time for the day. So once again, I would like to thank all of our speakers, as well as all of you who have attended today's session. And I hope that you will join us for our last webinar, which is, as Ron said, next Tuesday, March 9th, where we really dive into talking about community engagement, as well as some of the siting requirements that would be required around SMEs, and sort of that interesting conversation as we look to transition to sort of a low carbon economy. So thank you once again, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Maureen.